Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is a statement by Keith Brown on rail. The Minister will take questions at the end of his statement, and there should therefore be no interventions or interruptions. I call on Keith Brown. Minister, you've got 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful for the opportunity to make a further statement on the future of rail franchising in Scotland. Members may recall my statement in October following the West Coast mainline franchise debacle. I mentioned then that the Secretary of State had initiated the Laidlaw inquiry to look into the course of events in DFT that led to technical flaws and ultimately the termination of the process. And I also mentioned that he'd set up the Brown Review to look in detail at the implications for the remainder of the rail franchising programme, and in particular whether changes were needed to the way risk was assessed and to the bidding and evaluation processes. The Laidlaw inquiry reported today. I received a call this morning from Simon Burns MP, Under Secretary of State for Transport, and was provided with a copy of the report at 11:40 a.m. today. The findings of the inquiry make clear that there was inadequate planning and preparation, a complex organisational structure and a weak governance and quality assurance framework, and I expect that the DFT will want to revise its internal structure and processes in the light of the report. I think in Scotland we are clearly in a better place. However, we are not complacent and we are reviewing the findings to glean where we can ourselves make improvements. The Brown Review is expected to report at the end of the year, and I await its conclusions with interest. And should its findings give cause to change our procedures, then changes, of course, will be made. It's obviously imperative that we absorb lessons learned. And talking of lessons learned, it's frustrating to advise Parliament that yet again the UK Government offered no discussion or advance notice about its proposals regarding the West Coast mainline franchise. And that is a ridiculous state of affairs when discussing a key service which directly affects millions of travellers to and from Scotland. I understand that the deal struck between the UK Government and Virgin Rail Group is for a new franchise agreement to run for up to 23 months, from 9th of December, that's this coming Sunday, to 9th of November 2014, after which the West Coast mainline will be let under a longer-term franchise. It is reassuring that the previously planned timetable improvements from the 10th of December, which will deliver at long last regular hourly services between Glasgow and London, are to proceed. I await, however, details from the UK Government about any benefits that it's managed to secure for Scotland as a result of their new agreement. My intention today is to set out three things. First of all, the procurement programme for Scotland's rail franchises. Secondly, the date on which the existing franchise will terminate. And lastly, some proposed benefits of the future franchise that will now bring forward to the current franchise. As members will be aware, there will be two rail franchises. A 10-year ScotRail franchise with the option of a break after 5 years, and a separate sleeper franchise for up to 15 years. And whilst each of these future franchises is an exciting proposition, I, like many others, recognise that they are distinctly different, that they serve different requirements, that they'll deliver different outcomes, and they'll be of interest, of course, to different bidders. Accordingly, they'll need to be evaluated against criteria which is specific to each of them. And for those reasons, I've decided not to run a combined procurement exercise. Instead, there will be two quite separate exercises, and that will allow me to secure the best outcomes for each franchise. And as well as running two exercises, I want to ensure that we do not overstretch either ourselves or the bidders. And I therefore intend to phase the procurement of the franchises, and that should allow a smoothing of the peaks of the procurement tasks. Again, perhaps one of the lessons learned from the DFT situation. As a consequence, it's my intention to commence the procurement programme for the sleeper franchise in the spring of 2013, allowing sufficient time for any outcomes of the Brown Review to be incorporated, if necessary, and the ScotRail procurement will follow in the summer. There is real benefit in the focus of a separate sleeper franchise. However, the proof of the proposition will be seen in the quality of the bids received. Prudently, therefore, the timing of our procurement schedule would allow the sleeper to be reincorporated within the ScotRail franchise if we were not satisfied with the quality of bids received. I should say we do have a very high level of interest already. I hope, though, that the Chamber will note that I am seeking to manage risks through a measured, careful approach. It's particularly important when we note that the sleeper franchise is likely to be a contract in excess of £200 million, which in itself is a sizable sum. but which is dwarfed by a 10-year ScotRail franchise, which may be in excess of £2.5 billion, the biggest procurement project the Scottish Government will be entering into. So these kind of sums necessitate a cautious, prudent approach. We won't be rushed on this, will not be hasty, and there will be no risky shortcuts in terms of franchising in Scotland. Our approach must be measured. On the 4th of October, I advised the Chamber that I will not countenance compromising the procurement programme. I was clear that it would take at least 20 months to deliver the programme. Inevitably, starting the procurement exercise in the summer of 2013 for the refranchising of ScotRail has implications for the length of the current franchise. However, the current franchise contract gives me, as Minister, discretion to decide the end date of the current franchise within the range of 9th of November 2014 to 30 May 2015. Accordingly, I have been giving consideration to the best contract end date for Scotland's rail passengers and for the rail staff affected by this change. And I have looked for a date that will strike a sensible balance, allowing us to maintain our prudent procurement programme, whilst providing a suitable period to take full account of emerging views from the Brown Review and conduct a handover at a time that will not cause undue disturbance either to passengers or staff. I have decided, therefore, that it will be sensible to plan for the franchise handover at the end of the 2014-15 financial year on the 31st of March 2015. I would now like to turn briefly to service specifications. I will be in a position to share more details on the precise specification of the future franchises next year. However, I am keen to ensure that service benefits are realised at an early opportunity, and I am therefore pleased to announce the following benefits, which I had intended to deliver within the next franchise, but which will now commence in the current franchise, and I think which underline the Government's commitment to a passenger-focused railway. I want to ensure that the rail service is an attractive, affordable option, and I am pleased to advise that I have successfully negotiated an early fares cap with First ScotRail. I can confirm that peak fares will be capped in January 2014 and 2015 to RPI, delivering benefits 2 years earlier at no additional cost to the franchise subsidy. I also want to encourage greater rail use in the off-peak. I want attractive fares that will encourage commuters where they can to switch to off-peak services and better spread the demands on our rail services. And I want greater use of the train rather than the car for leisure travel. Successful negotiations with First ScotRail have resulted in off-peak fares being frozen after 2013. So provided that RPI remains below 3.5% per annum for the remainder of the franchise, off-peak fares will not increase by a single penny after 2013. And again, these benefits will be delivered at no extra cost to the subsidy. Now, I realise that for many travellers, improved services are as important as lower fares, and therefore, in 2014, in this franchise, there will, for example, be more frequent services between Glasgow and Ayr, improved services to Oban, additional Sunday services between Aberdeen and the Central Belt, as well as improved commuter services serving Aberdeen itself. I am also in a position to advise today that advance works for Stirling Alloa Dunblane electrification have been approved. We are working with Network Rail to prioritise delivery of this project within their 2014 to 2019 programme. Presiding Officer, to conclude, I set out our measured approach to procurement, outlined the process timetable, confirmed the date of the handover from the existing franchise and provided details of some early benefits. I hope the Parliament notes that whilst we are ambitious for the future of our rail services, we are cautious in the management of the realisation of that aim. Good management is what we believe taxpayers, passengers and those that operate our railways expect of a responsible government, and that's what we intend to deliver.
Thank you, Minister. The Minister will now take questions on issues raised in his statement. Members who wish to ask the question of the Minister should press the request to speak button now. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for questions, and then we will move on to next business. I call Elaine Murray. Ms Murray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I first thank the Minister for the opportunity to have early sight of his statement. However, it is disappointing that once again members of the Scottish Parliament have learned of the Government's intentions regarding a rail service in Scotland through the columns of a national newspaper and tweets rather than directly in the Chamber. The 10-year ScotRail franchise will have a breakpoint at 5 years. Will the Minister commit this time to genuine consultation with stakeholders regarding whether the contract should be broken at this point? I note the announcement of the approval of the advance works for the Stirling Alloa Dunblane electrification, in which I am sure the Minister has a keen interest. Does this signify a reinstatement of a part of the Edinburgh-Glasgow Improvement Programme, which was dropped from the programme in his statement in July? And if so, are other Egypt reinstatements under consideration? Many of us would hope they are. And finally, will the Minister and Transport Scotland, in drawing up the franchise, ensure sufficient flexibility to allow additional services and routes to be included? For example, and here I'm being parochial, an early morning service between Carlisle, Lockerbie and Edinburgh.
Minister.
Just to take this point, if I can, in turn, Presiding Officer, first of all, I can't be responsible for what appears in the columns of newspapers. I made the statement, first of all, to Parliament before making it to anybody else, and I think that's the right way to go about things. Can I say, in relation to agreeing the terms of the 5-year break, that will be the subject of discussion, obviously, with the potential bidders. But we've made that decision already. We've said we'll do that. There is, I concede, some information to go around that about exactly how that happens and what the context of it is. For example, the rights on both sides to break that agreement. And that will become more evident when we go into the franchise detail, which will come in the coming months. So we're not intending to consult specifically on that again, other than the consultations and discussions that we'll have with potential bidders. Can I also say to Lane Murray, we have never dropped the Stirling, Alloa, Dunblane or other parts of the Egypt programme. We've always said that those will continue in future phases. What's been announced today is that the advanced works which are required, which are actually ongoing in any event, for example, and I don't want to be parochial about this, but 2 bridge heightenings which are taking place in my area, this work has been going on anyway, whether it was vegetation clearance or work on bridges. All I'm saying is that Network Rail, in discussions with ourselves, have agreed that all those advanced works will now proceed. And it's also true of other parts of the Egypt programme that some will proceed in the first phase and some subsequently. Our last point by Elaine Murray was about additional services, and I think that's probably something I'll take on board just now, but we will make more detail available once we go into the greater specification of the franchises themselves. So that kind of issue about additional services in particular parts of Scotland can be covered at that stage.
Alex Johnson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I also thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement and welcome the fact that, regardless of what may be contained within it, this statement goes a long way to ending many of the uncertainties that we had after the previous statement and the circumstances which surrounded it. I nonetheless welcome much of what's proposed. Also, the news that there will be an extension of the East Coast Rail franchise should be welcome, but the criticism that the Government have chosen to level against their counterparts in the South should be taken with a pinch of salt as this Government wades towards the inevitable deep water of the Clyde and Hebridean ferry services. We'll see what develops. However, I would like to welcome the scale of improvements, but regret, as the previous speaker did, that many of the cuts that have been announced to the Edinburgh-Glasgow Improvement Programme will result in failure to deliver the kind of service improvement between Edinburgh and Glasgow that would have been possible under this next franchise on the promise of jam tomorrow. I continue to regret that. But nevertheless, I will ask the Minister to say quite clearly, as I believe is the case, that this statement and the ambitions that he has for the next franchise vindicate the current structure of the rail industry as it is organised in the United Kingdom and in Scotland, and invite him to give confidence to future bidders by giving a genuine commitment to the structure of the industry in the long term.
Minister.
Can I say that Alec Johnson could really have picked a better day to ask for the franchising system to be pronounced as being vindicated than today? I mean, when you see some of the commentary at Westminster, I don't know if you saw any of the debate earlier on, the criticisms levelled at the UK Government and the DfT, the criticisms levelled at the franchising process itself have never been more pronounced. So it's perhaps not the day to try and say that process has been vindicated. And you'll also be aware that both myself and the Cabinet Secretary and previously Alec Neil have written to UK ministers saying that we believe that the franchising process itself is one of the most expensive and drawn-out ways of procuring rail services, and we ask for greater discretion to decide our own way forward in how we procure rail services, and we refuse that discretion, so that will be something that can only come in future, obviously, from constitutional change or a change of mind in the meantime by the UK Government. And I would concede that change of mind is nowhere in prospect. The UK Government has made clear that it wants to try and mend and continue with the franchising process. His first point, though, was about uncertainties, and the uncertainties, it's worth pointing out, are not all gone. We don't know what the Brown Review is going to come back with. I had a very frustrating phone call this morning with the Under-Secretary of State when I said that we are trying to proceed with this franchise process at the same time as they are reviewing the whole basis of franchising. And to do that at the same time, not least without getting even the courtesy of a call to tell us what was in the report, is very difficult. However, everything that's been evidenced so far with Laidlaw and everything we know about the problems that have been at the DFT, we've taken on board to make sure that we will meet any challenges which that presents. Can I say in relation to the Clyde and Hebrides contract that there may well be deep water, and we don't expect it to be plain sailing, but we are confident we can negotiate those waters carefully. And we've done that so far, I think, in relation to the Clyde and Hebrides services, and will continue to do that. The final point I think that Alec Johnson made was in relation to Edinburgh to Glasgow. I think it's worth pointing out that the improvements that are expected are a different set of propositions from the amount of money that we're spending on it. There seems to be a great focus in both opposition parties in the fact we should spend more on this. What we said is that 80% of what we propose can be delivered for that price, and the rest of it is going to follow on either in phase one or potentially even quicker than that if it's possible to do that in our discussions with Network Rail. So it's perhaps best to focus on the massive improvements and the massive investments, £650 million, that we're going to put into improving the services between not just Edinburgh and Glasgow but associated areas as well. And I think it's a pretty good track record to build on.
I now have a number of speakers who wish to ask the Minister a question. Can I urge members to keep the questions brief, and can I encourage the Minister to keep the answers brief too? Colin Beattie, followed by Richard Baker.
Can the Minister provide the Chamber with some detail on what gives him greater confidence that we're in a safer position than the Department for Transport?
I'll try and be as brief as I can, but there are a number of points, Presiding Officer. First of all, we're not pursuing the high-risk long franchise with a complex GDP adjustment, which was at the centre of some of the problems that the DFT encountered. We've announced a 10-year franchise with the break option, which I mentioned, which provides the opportunity to de-risk the franchise, both for ourselves and for the parties that are bidding for it. And also, crucially, we are allowing 28 months for the franchise process. We've also set up a dedicated commercial unit, again, something that didn't happen down south. And finally, ministers are fully engaged in the key policy and programme decisions. These are the things which give us more reassurance about our process than has happened down south.
Richard Baker, followed by John Mason.
Will the Minister agree the extension to the current franchise allows more time for us to look at different options running the next franchise, including a not-for-profit model? Will he agree to meet with trade unions and other parties who are keen to promote such a model for the future?
Minister.
Of course, we were willing to engage with the trade unions. I've done so regularly up to now. I met with them this week. And of course, as I said before, within the current constraints that Westminster lays down in terms of franchising, it's possible for a not-for-profit option to come forward. We can't go and create that ourselves. That has to be other people bringing that forward. But of course, we'll engage with the trade unions and others on these issues.
John Mason, followed by Mark Griffin.
I wonder if there will be an option in the next franchise to allow for improved connection between rail and bus transport. I mean, we obviously don't want a monopoly, but we could maybe do with some improvements.
Minister.
I think I've said before that will be a vital part of the next franchise process. The obligation on bidders to demonstrate links between, for example, bus and rail. So things like Plus Bus and Rail and Sail and smart and integrated ticketing will be central to the next franchise. We're aware that some of the bidders may provide bus services as well as rail services, but some may not. So that's why we have the obligation on all those that are bidding to come forward with ways to properly integrate different transport modes.
Mark Griffin, followed by Dave Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I note the Minister has stated that advanced works for Stirling, Alloa, Dunblane electrification have been approved. Can the Minister outline when the electrification work itself is due to go ahead, as it's a vital component of a possible direct Stirling to London service run by Virgin and potentially starting in 2016, which would call it Cumbernauld Station and benefit my constituents massively?
Minister.
Well, once again, we're having to respond to a very late announcement, the one that the member refers to in terms of possible direct services to Stirling. What I can say is nothing could have been done about that in advance of, say, 2014 in any event. But the improvements in terms of electrification and the advance works will continue now for Stirling and Dunblane and Alloa. And we have said that this next phase would be in part delivered through, or in whole, in fact, delivered through 2014 to 2019. But we'll obviously keep an eye on opportunities which arise, as this one has done, apparently, as described in the press today, of direct services to Stirling. So the advance work is going on anyway. No time has been lost in relation to that. We'll obviously look at the Virgin announcement, and the electrification itself, in any event, was due to start in 2014, or between 2014 and 2019.
Dave Thompson, followed by Tavish Scott.
Can the Minister confirm that the specification of the next rail franchise for services to the Highlands will include better provision for luggage and cycles to cater for holidaymakers and better provision for disabled passengers? Will he also confirm the general comfort of passengers and the provision of adequate toilet facilities will be given more consideration, given that these are long journeys of several hours and current rolling stock is inadequate in this respect?
Minister.
Can I say I have a great deal of sympathy with the points that Dave Thompson raises, and bidders for the next franchise will be asked to demonstrate how they'll improve the comfort and the suitability of longer distance trains over the life of the franchise.
Tavish Scott, followed by Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank the Minister for an early insight of his statement, and also agree with his point about the importance of the discussions that should have taken place between his government and the UK government prior to the statement made in the House of Commons earlier on. Would he accept that 12 months ago the Scottish Government consulted on closing the Highland Sleeper service to London? The UK Government then offered £50 million to him and his colleagues to replace the Caledonian Sleeper fleet on the basis of joint funding between Holyrood and Westminster. Does today's statement mean this welcome investment is now agreed to the great benefit of overnight passengers between London, Inverness, Fort William and Aberdeen?
Minister.
I can confirm, as was confirmed some time ago, Tavish Scott's point about the agreed funding, £100 million of agreed funding for the sleeper services, £50 million from the UK Government and £50 million from the Scottish Government. Of course, that initial offer of £50 million to be spent within a period of 5 or 6 months was never really credible in a way of trying to replace, for example, rolling stock in that time period. So what we do have is an agreement with the Treasury. This will be spent over a period of time. And also, just to say that on the Rail 2014 consultation, we didn't consult specifically on closing sleeper services. We always had said that we wanted to, and saw a real opportunity to increase the patronage levels on that service. That's what we've been about, expanding the rail services, and that's what we're now demonstrating by this announcement.
Stuart McMillan, followed by Jenny Marra.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What emissions reductions targets are to be included in the new franchise agreement, and what scrutiny measures will be put in place to ensure the targets are being met?
Minister.
Well, the member will be aware that there are a number of initiatives which ScotRail take forward just now, which include driver training in order to make sure that we have better levels of emissions. So they were required to operate, for example, a driver simulator facility since the start of the current franchise, and also an eco-driving module has since been implemented, and all drivers are assessed on an annual basis. It's probably very difficult to isolate specifically the benefits from this scheme because it's coupled with other interventions such as coasting boards. But fuel savings have been identified as greater than 2.5%, the target set by ScotRail. The new franchise will include a requirement to monitor and target a carbon reduction to contribute to the requirements of the Climate Change Scotland Act 2009.
Jenny Marra, followed by Jamie Hitman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wrote to the Transport Minister in July this year asking him to take note of the fact that it is cheaper to buy a single from Dundee to Perth and another single from Perth to Glasgow than it is to buy a direct ticket from Dundee to Glasgow. I asked him in that letter to extend the regulated fare zone to include Dundee. In August, the Cabinet Secretary for Infrastructure... He replied to me saying he'd asked officials to look at ways of addressing this under the terms of the existing franchise. Can I ask the Minister what progress his officials have made in solving this under the existing franchise and what his plans are for Dundee fares under the forthcoming franchise?
Minister.
Can I just reiterate the point that the ability to deal with a number of anomalies in the fare structure across the franchise are obviously much greater in terms of the new franchise. In order to change anomalies just now, we have to buy out that part of the existing franchise, obviously signed into in 2004. So that is more expensive and more complicated than what we intend to do, which is try and remove some of these anomalies, in fact, all the anomalies completely in the new franchise. But work is ongoing to see what we can do during the current franchise with the franchise arrangements and obligations that we've inherited from previous administrations.
Jamie Hitman, followed by Dave Stewart.
Thank you, President Officer. Can the Minister tell the Chamber the reasons for those service improvements he set out being selected? And can he also set out that any new franchise arrangements will not preclude the possibility of new services to stations like Croy, Greenfalls and Cumbernauld in my constituency being put into place if they are identified as being a possibility?
Minister.
Can I say that, no, it doesn't preclude improvements, as is mentioned in response to Elaine Murray's point, and as I say, we'll come forward in the next few months to talk about greater specification of what we expect to see in the franchise. The review that we've just announced, or has been announced, might propose, I'm talking about the Brown Review from Westminster, might propose greater separation of specification and evaluation of franchises, or even an organisational split. So there are things which we have to be aware of could change because of the review that's been announced, but there is no reason why we can't look at improving services. And as a member will know, we also have announced, as part of the new franchise, a £30 million fund for new stations to be, or improved stations to be funded as well. So the prospect for growing the railway, increasing patronage, is quite substantial.
David Stewart, and finally John Scott.
Presiding Officer, does the Minister share my view that increasing the speed of rail services is the best way of getting drivers out of cars and onto trains, but the capacity improvements necessary on the Highland Main Line can best be met by providing more strategically located dynamic loops to allow trains to pass each other at speed, rather than wait in short loops? Is the Minister satisfied that both the lines connecting Inverness with the North East and the South are still largely single track?
Minister.
I think it is true to say, and I think Dave Stewart will know, that both in terms of the rail network and also the roads network which we've inherited, there have been decades of underinvestment in transport infrastructure in Scotland. We are trying as best we can to remedy that, both by improving journey times and by improving the infrastructure itself. Obviously, we're trying to do that at the same time, for example, as providing a new railway service to the borders, and many of the improvements which are mentioned in terms of Egypt, potentially a high-speed rail line as well between Edinburgh and Glasgow. It isn't possible to do everything at once, but we're well aware of the pressing need there is to do more in terms of the Highland Line. We have announced, I think I've responded to the member in relation to some of the points that he's raised already, and we are intending to improve journey times to the Highlands. More work, though, in terms of major infrastructure will, of course, require more funding, and that can only be committed when it becomes available.
John Scott.
Thank you. While welcoming the much improved service between Ayr and Glasgow under the new timetable, the Minister is aware of the reduction in service under the new timetable between Ayr and Paisley, which, for example, adversely affects my constituents working for and studying at the University of the West of Scotland. The Minister's statement mentions improved services between Ayr and Glasgow in 2014, and I wonder if this problem in and around Paisley might be addressed then if it cannot be resolved before then.
Minister.
Can I say, I don't recognise the reduction in service which the member refers to. There are a huge number of new seats being provided by the changes which we're making on Glasgow to Ayr services. New services and new seats. What's been announced today as part of the discussions that we've had with ScotRail, talking about the time of the franchise, is a further increase, 2 further services in relation to that. But I'm happy to write to the member with all the details of the services as they'll stand after this agreement takes effect.
Thank you. And that now finishes the statement from the Minister. We now move on to the next item of business, which is a debate on motion number 5109 in the name of Angela Constance on the modernisation of Scotland's career services. Members who wish to take part in the debate should press the request to speak button now. And I call on Angela Constance to speak to and move the motion. Minister, you have 13 minutes.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Having the right people with the right skills and the right jobs is central to growing Scotland's economy, and an effective career service is a crucial foundation to this. Scotland has and will maintain career services for people of all ages, and we must ensure they respond to all service users, regardless of where they are in their career. And within that, we do have a clear and very necessary priority to support our young people as they move on from the world of education into the world of work. And there is a compelling case for modernising our career services. We know that people who use these services want a flexible, responsive service, and that they want to be able to access it at a time and in a place and in a way that suits them. And let's not forget that the world of work is changing rapidly. We need to make sure that individuals get the support they need to plan and manage the choices and changes that they are likely to face throughout their careers. The time, therefore, is absolutely right for modernising Scotland's career services. The Framework for Service Redesign and Improvement, which I launched last August, provides the blueprint for doing this. Moving on from school is an important and exciting step for young people. There are a huge amount of different learning and career opportunities out there. But knowing which direction to take can be challenging and confusing. And that's why it's so important for young people to understand what their options are,
what's involved and how they can actually access them. Young people will, of course, look to their parents, to their peers and to their teachers to help make decisions about their career. This, together with the support provided by highly skilled and well-informed career services, gives them access to a valuable package of information, advice and guidance. And my aspiration is for a high-performing education and skills system centred on the learner and responsive to employer needs. A system that enables individuals to develop the skills that they need to get a job, to keep a job and to progress to a better job, regardless of how far away they are from the labour market. So with this in mind, our career system will deliver a universal service for all young people with career management skills delivered in the classroom and with additional tailored support for those young people in greatest need. Skills Development Scotland is... Yes, of course.
I'm interested in your comments about universal service for all young people. I've got in front of me Putting Learners at the Centre, Delivering Our Ambitions for Post-16 Education, in which it says that she intends to have a universal all-age service. Is she abandoning people that are not under the age of 25?
Minister?
No, absolutely not. And one of the strengths of the career service as it stands and enhanced by modernisation is that it will be a flexible, responsive system and with the use of technology will enable people, once they have left education, to access information and also to exercise their right to face-to-face contact. So nobody, and most certainly not in this government, is abandoning any young person of any age. Skills Development Scotland is, of course, driving forward this modernisation, working closely with other partners in doing so. And our approach in Scotland can truly claim to be pioneering and in marked contrast with that taken south of the border. Indeed, it's been praised by Dame Ruth Silver, co-chair of the House of Commons Skills Commission, as being both impressively panoramic and highly professional in its ambition for its nation. An approach that trains and hands over to individuals the skills to navigate for themselves a changing world of changing options. And I most certainly endorse this praise. Because we need to equip our young people to seek and grasp career opportunities and ensure that they have the agility to cope when their circumstances change and adapt their plans accordingly. And this is what we want all young people to have the skills to do throughout their working lives. And at the heart of our universal offer is Skills Development Scotland's online service, My World of Work, which is available 24/7. This cutting-edge resource holds a wealth of information about the widest range of possible careers and extensive range of courses available to enable people to move towards and into these careers. Now, we all know that the way in which we communicate and exchange information has changed. We know that digital devices are ever present in young people's lives. And young people, more than any of us here, use the internet to get information on all sorts of things. And careers advice is no exception. And this is why we are enhancing the career service with online facilities through My World of Work. And I'll give you to Mr Smith.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way. Of course, the move from face-to-face support to online support does have its challenges. Is she aware, for example, that recent figures that I have suggest that 83% of school children in Glasgow are not registered for My World of Work?
Minister. Can we just be clear, Presiding Officer, that you don't need to be registered to access career service? Yeah, of course, we want young people to uptake registration because we think it's in their interest. This is a good and valuable tool, and we will promote the registration. Every month that goes by, and of course the figures that Mr Smith now quotes I believe to be out of date, but as every month goes by, we have an increase in registration, not just, and I'm not finished dealing with Mr Smith's point, every month that goes by, the increase in registration increases by 10 to 15%. And I also take exception to the fact of this notion that we seem to be replacing face-to-face contact, because we're not. And if Mr Smith looks at parliamentary questions that I answered in response to Ms Dugdale, he will see that we are saying that 130,000 young people in S4, 5 and 6 will indeed receive a universal career service, and they will receive career management skills as part of the curriculum for excellence within the classroom, and that's our baseline universal service. And in addition to that, we want to tackle the adversity faced by some of our most disadvantaged young people in our society, and we are determined to use the highly skilled professionals, career guidance services to help tackle disadvantage in the lives of young people and to help improve the life chances of all our young people. And of course, all young people, and in fact everyone in Scotland, will continue to be able to use drop-in centres, career centres across Scotland, and to telephone Skills Development Scotland's contact centre, in addition to face-to-face contact, because all young people will develop career management skills as part of the curriculum for excellence. And for those who need it most, intensive services will be continued to be focused on young people who are at risk of disengaging beyond school and those who have already disengaged. And this will involve individually tailored coaching, planning and ongoing support to enable young people to find, take up and sustain their chosen career path. And our modern career services therefore offer a much more integrated approach, including face-to-face contact, web-based resources, contact centres, and enabling young people to develop their career management skills delivered as an integral element of curriculum for excellence. I want career guidance services to be at the heart of our education system, because under this government they will no longer be a bolt-on service.
Career services to be at the heart of the system. How then can she explain a 20% cut in frontline services? Not my figure, a figure that Unison have put to every member in this chamber.
Minister.
Mr Dale, I'll be aware that it's no secret that Skills Development Scotland have indeed in the past had voluntary severance schemes, a voluntary severance scheme that ended in March 2012. But in terms of frontline staff in our schools, there's actually a marginal increase. And I would have thought, given the tough times, well, I think it's 246 to 251 full-time equivalent staff actually in our school. And I would have thought that should be celebrated, given the adverse times that we live on to. Now, together, I think it's important that we do provide a greater mix and balance of support firmly focused on the needs of individuals. And while this new approach is challenging, and it will require Skills Development Scotland working with other partners to build capacity across the learning and support system to ensure that collectively they provide the best possible career services for our young people. And in doing so, they have not sought to reinvent the wheel. Rather, they are building on the system and processes already in place, including those being used by several local authorities to identify individual needs and to tailor and to personalise career services accordingly. As I've already said, Presiding Officer, we need to recognise that the world of work has changed and is constantly evolving. Today, on average, a person will have around 10 different jobs during their lifetime, spanning different occupational sectors and geographical locations. As they do this, they will need to adapt to keep pace, to move with a changing industrial base and to operate successfully in an ever-evolving global economy. And Scotland needs a responsive, skilled workforce. Our young people, our greatest asset and our greatest resource, understand this and indeed are moving with the times. And our career services need to support this change. Standing still is just not an option. And of course, I accept any organisational change is difficult and can be daunting for staff. And that's why Skills Development Scotland are supporting their team of skilled careers professionals through this change. And this includes unprecedented investment in a programme of professional development, new mobile technology to aid flexible working, and crucially, the creation of a Skills Development Scotland Academy. Together, this will ensure that all our careers professionals remain at the forefront of international best practice. And it doesn't stop there. Careers advice must be supported by a strong understanding of labour market needs. Skills Development Scotland is committed to providing up-to-the-minute information on where the jobs are and where the jobs will be, and on the skills issues facing Scottish companies. This will help us both support individual ambition and drive economic growth. And I am pleased to say that already our approach for individuals is being recognised as best practice by the UK Commission for Employment and Skills. I'll give you Mrs. Scanlon.
Okay, I'm obviously not on the Education Committee and quite new to this, but I am reading the briefing from Unison, which says that SDS staff, 93% of them disagree that this new service delivery model will result in an enhanced service. So, if it's so good, why aren't the staff supporting it?
Well, Mrs. Scanlon, I'm aware only of that survey because it is quoted in the Unison briefing distributed to members today. I have, of course, seen press comments about the Unison briefing. Unfortunately, that Unison briefing has not been put forward to SDS, the employers. I therefore cannot comment in detail about information that I have not received or that Skills Development Scotland has not received. But what I will say to reassure Mrs Scanlon is that I understand that the survey had 350 staff participate in the survey out of a headcount of 1,150 staff. And this survey took place before the intensive face-to-face engagement of senior Skills Development Scotland staff, face-to-face engagement with their frontline staff, and before the commencement of this intensive continuous professional development training. So I hope that reassures Mrs Scanlon, who is understandably concerned about Unison's concern. But can I end by saying,
stop having remarks from a sedentary position?
That this government is firmly committed to high-quality, universal career services for people of all ages, services that are independent, impartial and informed, and which support individual young people and employers. And we should rightly be proud of our career services. They have been instrumental in achieving a record high 87.2% of school leavers sustaining further learning, training or work. However, we still have a job to do, Presiding Officer, and I am confident that working together we can build in our young people the capacity to plan and manage their own careers, to improve their life chances and to help grow our economy. Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I move the motion in my name.
I now call on Neil Findlay to speak to and move amendment number 5109.2. Mr Findlay, you've got 9 minutes.
Good afternoon, Presiding Officer. My experience of being a recipient of careers guidance at school was not a particularly good one. However, that probably said more about my attitude as a surly, spotty youth rather than the ability or lack of ability of the careers staff involved. And I hear Mr Russell muttering some comments about that. But helping young people with careers development is very...
I think in this case Mr Russell was the innocent party, but some of his colleagues were certainly intervening. Mr Findlay.
Humbly apologise. Somebody has obviously got the same dulcet tones as you. Helping young people with their careers development is obviously very important, and our young people need to develop skills so that they make the right subject choices at school and the right choices for college and university, so that they can prepare for the increasingly fast-paced and volatile jobs market. And career services are also critical to the development of the wider economy, and this is self-evident when we see the high levels of youth unemployment across Scotland. In my own council area, an area I know the Minister knows very well, we have youth unemployment standing at a very worrying 30%. So I'm afraid that the Minister's self-satisfied motion, which seeks to celebrate reform, is misguided on the basis of the evidence that we see before us, evidence that does not reflect life in the real world. Presiding Officer, as I'm sure you know, I'm always willing to applaud the government when they do good things, and I would genuinely have preferred to have been complimenting the Minister for implementing effective reforms of the career service. But unfortunately, evidence is mounting that the so-called modernisation of the career service is like college regionalisation driven by a cost-cutting agenda that is leading to tens of thousands of young people being left with little or indeed no real careers guidance. Presiding Officer, the corporate strategy of SDS confirms the Careers Information, Advice and Guidance Strategy places and I quote, a particular emphasis on giving individuals the ability to manage their own career journeys by developing the relevant skills. But this ability to manage their own career journey is being driven in one direction, and that is away from people and human interaction to the web-based service referred to My World of Work. But there are serious misgivings about the effectiveness and impact of My World of Work. These concerns broadly fall into two camps, I would suggest. Firstly, the numbers of young people who are actually registering, and the key point is that is people who are registering, not necessarily using the service. And secondly, the effectiveness of the web-based service when young people actually do log on and use it. In 2009, academic researchers Cathy Howson and Sheila Semple were commissioned by SDS to look at web-based services. And they said that the value of career websites in supporting users' career development remains untested. Very little is known about the impact of career websites on young people's career-related knowledge and skills, and whether such websites can deliver the gains that have been identified as accruing previously from careers, information, advice and guidance. And they ask whether all young people have the technical abilities to use the websites, just a moment, and are they able to deal with the volume and complexity of information available?
Minister.
Aware of the reputable researchers and the research conducted in 2009, which was actually pre-My World of Work. But I wonder if Mr Finlay would accept that I would accept the important findings of that work, which actually states that young people value both access to web-based information as well as face-to-face contact.
Neil Finlay.
To that point, because the academics suggest that web-based services, while potentially a useful tool, should not replace the current face-to-face contact which they found was valued by pupils and teaching staff. We agree with them. They say that web-based services provide information, not advice, and that is a critical distinction, and that young people, no matter their ability or background, need help in interpreting information and developing a career plan. And incidentally, the research that the Minister was referring to was embargoed by SDS because they didn't like the conclusions of it. Presiding Officer, I have an SDS spreadsheet that identifies that across Scotland, tens of thousands of young people are no longer accessing any form of careers guidance. Nationally, as Drew Smith referred to figures in his area, up until 31st of October, only 17% of school pupils across Scotland were registered with My World of Work. 17%. In my own local authority area, only 16% are registered. And this is not the fault of councils, because across Scotland we see very alarming figures irrespective of political colour, the political colour of the administration. In Angus, 11%, Argyll 19%, Shetland 14%, Perth 17% and Dumfries 16%. The highest figure for registration is in Highland, where 37% are registered. And why are the numbers so low? Well, SDS have adopted a new traffic light system, and this categorises our young people as red, amber or green. And this determines if they will receive careers guidance or if they can be left to manage their own career journey. It's estimated that 100,000 young people are in the green category, and these pupils receive, as the Minister referred to, the SDS universal offer. Sounds very grand. This in practice means a session that could be to a class or a group, but that could be half a school period on the CMS framework and another half period on My World of Work. This is counted by SDS as 2 interventions per child, per pupil. So a session delivered to a hall full of pupils, maybe a year group of 200, counts as 400 individual interventions and is recorded accordingly. But even with this creative accountancy, if only 17% have registered, then we can see very clearly that tens of thousands are receiving little or no careers guidance at all. Certainly.
Minister, surely, since Mr Finlay is so well informed from his sources, either in trade unions or in Skills Development Scotland, will he not therefore accept that STS have given a commitment that over the course of the next year that they will, in the context of group within classrooms, see every S4, S5 and S6 pupil to tell them about career management skills and to introduce them to World of Work, and that therefore, in addition to that, people can come forward seeking more advice. Yep. And does he recall what information and what advice, what standard were previously available prior to 2008? As he's saying that we used to guarantee every person, did we give every young person access to career guidance?
Mr Finlay, you took the intervention. I'll give you time back. Neil Finlay.
Thank you. My question is not about we will eventually get round to seeing all these pupils. There's pupils in the class now who are getting no careers guidance at all. That's the real issue here. And I'm also advised by people in education that many pupils are unassigned to any category. And this was denied at the committee by senior management of SDS when they appeared before the Education Committee last week. Perhaps the Minister can clarify whether this is in fact the case in her closing remarks. Presiding Officer, the approach of the Government seems to be underpinned by an unproven and untested assumption that 100,000 young people categorised as green will use My World of Work and may not want or need face-to-face guidance. But surely if we look at university dropout rates, 9.4%, then that would suggest that young people of all abilities need to be helped into making good careers choices. And for those in the post-school setting, we see a reduction in staff numbers and office opening hours. The end of drop-in services and introduction of an appointment-only system, and advisors stopped from carrying out home visits and from taking clients to interviews in cars and the like. So how will these actions help to make inroads into youth unemployment when the post-school offer and the post-school service is changing so much? Presiding Officer, all of this is dressed up in the language of modernisation, a very loaded word that is often applied to give the impression that it means progress. Unison represent the SDS staff believe modernisation is a cover for budget cuts rather than a drive to improve the service, cuts that have resulted in 200 frontline staff losing their jobs. And where the Minister gets the view that there's been an increase in staffing, I have no idea. They were so concerned at the changes and the cutbacks that they conducted a survey of their members, as people have been referring to, and the results are startling. Only last month, 89% of the 400 staff who responded either disagreed or strongly disagreed with the assertion the new service delivery model will result in an enhanced service for the people of Scotland. Morale is low, staff feel de-skilled, and their professional judgment no longer required. They also identify a culture at SDS where there is no room for any debate on this, any debate on the direction of the organisation, and on this SDS have formed. They do not appear to like to hear other people's views, and as I mentioned, they embargoed the previous research despite the fact that they themselves commissioned it. And these academics are currently engaged in further research. And what has happened? SDS has ordered its staff not to cooperate with the research. This is frankly astonishing, and I think the Minister simply has to step in and allow that to happen. To conclude, Presiding Officer, just because you brand something with the label modernisation doesn't mean it's good or it's better than what went before. The changes being made are untested and unproven. There is no independent research that states that the more clever you are, the less you need to see a careers advisor, or the better you are at managing your own career. 83% of secondary school pupils were unregistered by the end of October. We are very worried about this. We think the Government should be too, and we think the approach so far is complacent in the extreme. Thank you.
Mr Finlay, can I check, did you move your amendment?
Sorry, move the amendment.
Thank you very much. I now call on Liz Smith to speak to move amendment 5109.1. 7 minutes, Ms Smith.
Deputy Presiding Officer, thank you. Last month, the importance of careers guidance was put into rather sharp focus for the cross-party group on colleges and universities. Bill Porterfield of Burn Stewart Distillers, who was providing the committee with a report about the ambitions that he and some other local businesses have for helping young people into successful careers, began his contribution with the following observation. He said, when exam time comes, the education system tells you to put away your calculators, your mobiles and your textbooks, try to remember everything that you've learned for the last 2 years for a 2-hour exam, don't copy anyone and don't ask anyone else for help. This must be all your own work. What happens on day one in the workplace? You are handed a calculator, a mobile, a set of instructions. You are told not to rely on anything that you've learnt up till now, and whatever you do, do ask for help. It is the absolute opposite of the academic experience which finished only a few weeks before. A bit of satire, perhaps, but nonetheless, it serves to set out the culture shock which faces many young people when they enter the world of work. Because what is at stake is somebody's future career and the ability to know what to expect, to understand the appropriate ethos, how to take instruction, what your rights and responsibilities are. In short, it's so much about the good communication skills that you have, and crucially, it's about how you add value to the workplace, just as much as it is about your qualifications. Deputy Presiding Officer, it's my contention that it is the earliest discussions in a pupil's school life about possible career paths that can have the most significant impact, by no means determining exactly what they will do post-school, but certainly sowing the seeds on the possible paths. And it's also my contention that it is vitally important that these initial discussions must be well informed and properly followed up, rather than be in whole class or in some cases whole year group mandatory chats from a teacher at school. In the past, and even in a few schools today, this latter approach has been a bit all too familiar, and it has done little more than advise pupils which prospectuses to read or which websites to use. If the philosophy of earliest identification is true for looking after the social and educational needs of our youngest children, so too is it true for careers guidance. And in my book, that means starting out with better careers guidance in the early years of secondary school, prior to subject choice for external qualifications. I would argue very strongly that there needs to be effective guidance about why there are different approaches to the different disciplines of science, arts, social sciences, etc., because you'll be very surprised that while pupils often know which subjects fall into these categories, they're not always aware of how you learn in these different disciplines. And that must surely be complemented by an understanding of the world of work and the skills that are required in any occupation. So let's be very clear about the obligations that schools have. Firstly, not least because of the principles which underpin the Curriculum for Excellence, particularly in Document 4 of Building the Curriculum, there is an obligation to ensure that the guidance provided at school is personal and no longer shaped by a one-size-fits-all approach. That latter approach may be fine for the initial session, but it is certainly not appropriate as pupils begin to discuss their own individual programme. And I would particularly commend those schools across Scotland who take time to interview their pupils on a very regular one-to-one basis, and who in the later years of school ask pupils to select one member of the school staff to act as a personal tutor. Because this is the pupil's choice, it has the huge advantage of ensuring the system has a high chance of success, and that they see this member of staff on a very regular basis. Secondly, the school has an obligation to ensure that it is fully involving parents in the process, given that parents still remain the single biggest influence on young people's choices in the earliest stages. It makes things very much better to know that school and home are working together, and also that it's very beneficial when local businesses or recruitment agencies can also be involved. As was said at the cross-party group, it is never too early to start work on what the expectations are within the workplace and the skills that are required in any professional working environment. There is also the obligation in the school to ensure that they track their pupils once they have left school, so that the school becomes much better informed about how well the careers guidance has worked and where they might be falling short. Now, that is something that universities and colleges are doing exceptionally well just now, and I think it's something that could come down to school level. The Scottish Government has set out this afternoon the key elements of the strategy to modernise career services across Scotland. And that's welcome, but only as far as it goes. Because there is no doubt that some of the new approaches that have been highlighted will be enormously beneficial in providing youngsters with a much better awareness of what options are available. But I do think the strategy needs to be considerably expanded, and I have concerns in respect on two fronts, one of which echoes the concerns that have been set out by Labour this afternoon. Firstly, what matters most is the quality of the information available and the ability of the youngster to understand and use the information appropriately. New technology, especially new collaborative websites, etc., are surely important, but their success will be determined by the qualitative judgments made by the youngster. That needs human input as well as technical input, and I don't think we should be in any doubt about the need for a fully coordinated approach when providing this. And that's why I wholeheartedly agree with what Labour is saying, that there is grave cause for concern about some of the evidence that has been provided to the Education Committee. It was clear that by no means are the stakeholders involved in agreement about what is the best way forward. Specifically, as Labour has said, there is concern about the fact that there is scope for too many people still to fall through the net. They've pointed to the registration issue. I think that's a serious concern. And whilst I understand the principles of the system that the government is trying to put into operation, I do think that we have to look carefully at expanding this whole process so that not only do we have more youngsters involved critically at an earlier stage, but we are also satisfied that it has the confidence of the main stakeholders involved. Deputy Presiding Officer, if I can sum up, I cannot emphasise, not just as a politician but as a former school teacher, how important careers guidance is. We have to get this right. I think we have to be a bit broader in our outlook than the current Scottish Government is just now. I move the amendment in my name.
Thank you. We now turn to the open debate. We have a little bit of time in hand at this stage of the debate, speeches of 6 minutes, and I call Gordon MacDonald to be followed by Neil Bibby.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Institute of Career Guidance, the leading professional body for the career guidance sector in the UK, with a membership of 3,500 practitioners, has on its website the following definition of what career guidance should be. Career guidance refers to services and activities intended to assist individuals of any age and at any point throughout their lives to make educational training and occupational choices and to manage their careers. Such services may be found in schools, universities and colleges, in training institutions, in public employment services, in the workplace, in the voluntary or community sector and in the private sector. The activities may take place on an individual or group basis and may be face-to-face or at a distance, including helplines and web-based services. They include career information provision, assessment and self-assessment tools, counselling interviews, career education programmes to help individuals develop their self-awareness, opportunity awareness and career management skills, taster programmes, work search programmes and transitional services. The definition was adopted by the Institute of Career Guidance after it was used in international reviews conducted by the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the European Commission and the World Bank. Last year, the Government published Career Information Advice and Guidance in Scotland, a framework for service design. The report stated that the Careers Service must make more of a difference to more people, school pupils, students and graduates, those who are in or out of work and those with low or no skills. In the foreword, the Minister said, "Career information, advice and guidance is more important than ever in enabling people and business to develop their knowledge and skills in order to take full advantage of the opportunities before them." She continued, "Our aim is to enhance significantly the range and quality of services across the country and make it easier than ever for people and employers to access career information, advice and guidance." The new framework continues the self-referral model of young people accessing career services in schools, which was introduced in 1984. It aims to respond to the differing needs of individuals. Those only requiring a little assistance will be encouraged to use the new website. Others will require 6 to 8 face-to-face interviews with career advisors, and a small number will require a more intensive support mechanism to get them ready for the world of work. SDS launched My World of Work in August 2011, a website dedicated to all-age career advice. Since its launch, it has attracted 150,240 registrations, up 11.6% in November alone. Over 70,000 registrations were by young people between the ages of 12 and 19. This is as a result of career advisors visiting schools and promoting the website to young people. The Careers Service, the forerunner to SDS, previously had a careers website, And as Danny Logue explained at the Education and Culture Committee, in 1985 we discussed the introduction of a careers database called Microdoors. In 1993 we discussed careers company websites, and in 2002 the Careers Scotland website was introduced. The new website, My World of Work, is an enhanced and expanded website with additional tools that continues this tradition. The website has a CV builder, tests to help identify individual strengths and where their skills would be relevant, film clips providing insights into unfamiliar fields, which is useful for people who are either starting off in their career or have lost their job and need to widen their search. The website also carries a list of current vacancies. In Scotland, over 70% of homes have internet access, and many young people have access to the internet on smartphones or tablet computers. Therefore, young people are now able to access the careers website, not just now, thanks, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. However, if an individual still needs assistance, then, as Malcolm Barron of SDS stated, if they find that they are still confused, uncertain and unsure about what their steps should be, they should get advice from a highly qualified professional careers advisor. And he continued, the other point is that if a parent feels that their son or daughter is struggling, they have an opportunity to make the application as well. This was confirmed by the Minister when she said in an answer to Drew Smith recently that we are retaining access to a universal service in which any person who wishes an appointment or face-to-face contact with a well-paid professional will receive that. SDS are, along with school guidance staff, integrating a whole system of career management into the curriculum for excellence. Danny Logue stated at the committee, we are looking at how we build young people's capacity to manage their careers, not just the transition point of leaving school, but through their working lives. David Cameron, an education consultant, agreed that Curriculum for Excellence could support this development. He stated in tests in June of this year, I think a lot of the skills we are trying to encourage through the Curriculum for Excellence would actually help young people around us, because it is about decision-making, being able to see what is out there, to look at that against your own capacities and make good choices. Presiding Officer, one measure of the success of the modernisation of the career service will, in conjunction with the opportunities for all guarantee, be the successful outcome of those pupils with positive destinations, and the last figures available show that at 87.2% of pupils leaving school achieving a positive destination, that this is at a record high.
Before I call Neil Bibby, I'll just again say I do have some extra time for members who take interventions. I can give some time back. Neil Bibby to be followed by Joan McAlpine.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think that's the first time I've heard an SNP member quote David Cameron, but there's a first time for everything. I think it's important that we have this debate today because there is no doubting the importance of good quality careers advice, information and guidance for young people in terms of setting them on the best path for the future. The Scottish Government's 2011 framework for service redesign and improvement describes a commitment to all-age, universal career information, advice and guidance as a central feature of the Scottish skills system. I think that's something that we would welcome across the Chamber. However, it would appear that from the reaction to the new system, from those directly working in its implementation, and from recent registration statistics for the My World of Work website, that young people are not getting the advice or information they need. And I believe the Scottish Government has failed to grasp the difference between careers information and careers advice. As we've already heard this afternoon, the new school service offered by Skills Development Scotland categorises pupils according to perceived need in a traffic light system. Green pupils are expected to use the online services offered by Skills Development Scotland's My World of Work website. Amber pupils, those pupils with poor attendance or low attainment or who come from so-called difficult backgrounds, are seen by careers advisors, and red pupils, only about 400 nationally according to Unison, those already disengaged from education, involved with social work or in criminality or who have learning needs, are diverted to organisations, including charities, which offer alternative provisions such as the Prince's Trust. Presiding Officer, around 100,000 pupils, 75% of pupils, are going to be put in the green category. They are considered to have good training or job prospects. As a result, around 3/4 of Scottish students are not automatically going to get tailored professional advice about their next steps in life. At this vital juncture between school and employment or tertiary education, around 100,000 young people will not get that advice. Now, I appreciate that in tough times priorities need to be made. However, I do not believe that 100,000 pupils not getting automatic tailored advice is necessary or the right thing to do. Giving young people one-on-one...
Minister.
I'm grateful to Mr Bibby for giving me. I wonder, is he aware of the system that Skills Development Scotland inherited, whereby young people had to request information and guidance from professional career staff, that they didn't, even in the good old days, get advice automatically, and they had to request that advice through a really antiquated system, such as some card index system?
Well, I'm not going to pretend the situation before was brilliant, but the fact is the situation just now is unacceptable. Giving young people one-on-one advice to allow them a decent chance of getting a job is not too much for them to ask for. But that is exactly what you're doing. You're asking young people to ask for it. I fear many young people will not ask for it when they need it, and many young people will then fall through the gap if it proceeds the way it is at the moment. The evidence from professionals is clear on this, and the evidence presented to the Education and Culture Committee last week. Unison argued that their members working in careers advice had serious reservations about the careers information advice guidance strategy. In a survey of Unison members, 92% believe that the new RAG model created danger of people slipping through the net. The message is clear. A website is not a replacement for face-to-face contact. In addition, a web-based system itself presents problems for young people. The previous speaker mentioned 70% of people having access to the internet. Over 30% of Scots do not have access to broadband in their home. It's therefore no wonder that registration for the website is so low. Closing careers offices will also not help these young people in accessing the new online career services.
Drew Smith. Can I have Drew Smith, Mike?
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful to Mr Bibby for giving me. And would the member also agree that it's precisely in those areas where young people are most likely to find themselves unemployed that we find the lowest rates of high-quality broadband access, both at home and often in schools?
Neil Bibby.
I would agree with that, and as a West of Scotland MSP, I'm going to come on to that later. However, it's not just the professionals who appear to be at odds with this new careers system. The uptake on the My World of Work website has been frankly anaemic, both in the region I represent and also across Scotland. The most recent figures that I've seen show that in Inverclyde, around 12% of school pupils have signed up to the website. In Renfrewshire, that figure drops to 11%. In East Renfrewshire, it drops again to 10%. This average in the region I represent is 14% below the Scottish average, a region with one of the highest rates of youth unemployment in the UK. I worry, Presiding Officer, that we will not see a majority of pupils accessing the My World of Work website. I worry that we will also see pupils miss out on the careers advice, but it may be up to 80 or 90% in some areas, could even miss out on careers information. This situation is unacceptable. Many parents and young people will be rightly worried about pupils not having access to a careers advisor. All pupils, regardless of their academic performance, deserve the right advice. As Neil Finlay alluded to earlier, even in the areas with the highest academic achievements in Scotland, we see high levels of university dropout rates. In the current economic climate, it is more vital than ever that pupils make the right decisions when leaving school. The Minister regularly claims that she cares passionately about young people and giving young people the best life chances. I wouldn't argue or doubt that for a minute. I think what we need, Minister, for you to do is that show your policies are in the best interests of young people and give people confidence in this system. And I hope you will use your power to allay the fears of professionals, of parents and, most importantly, pupils in this regard. Finally, Presiding Officer, I want to make a point about this debate being framed by the government as modernising the career service. The reality is they are cutting the career service. It is a cut when there is a 20% reduction in frontline career service staff. It is a cut when 100,000 Scottish pupils don't get tailored careers advice, because there is a difference between information and advice. The information I have already set out. My advice, Presiding Officer, is for the Government to rethink their approach.
Thank you. Paul John McAlpine, to be followed by John Pentland.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Before I start, can I point out that the David Cameron mentioned by my colleague Gordon MacDonald is in fact a very highly respected educational consultant in Scotland, and I would absolutely hate Mr Bibby to get into trouble for making an inadvertent error, and I'm sure he'll correct the record timiously. I want to talk today particularly about the Amber group of young people identified by Skills Development Scotland as being in need of additional support from the Careers Service. Because of things like poor academic attainment or attendance, there are around 35,000 people estimated who are going to be classified as Amber under the new strategy, and I understand they will receive between 6 to 8 one-to-one meetings per term. I'm surprised that the traffic light system which targets this group is viewed so negatively by Labour in particular, because it was the previous Labour administration historically who identified this group as a priority. They were identified as NEET young people not in education, employment and training, and we don't use that term now, but it was understood that there were far too many of them in Scotland. The highest proportion... No, I want to make progress, thanks. I want to make progress, thanks. There were the highest proportion of these young people in Europe. Such was the concern about these teenagers that the previous administration under Jack McConnell brought together the Smith group of our most successful business leaders to work with government to find a solution. As well as the chairman, Lord Smith of Kelvin, the group included Tom Hunter and Willie Hawley and Jim McCall, who have all put their money where their mouths are to fund various entrepreneurial and innovative educational opportunities. The Smith Group has continued to work closely with this SNP government, and it was on their recommendation that a Minister of Youth Employment was created, the first appointment in these islands. And we've also taken forward many of their ideas about increasing vocational education with our record number of modern apprenticeship starts and our opportunities for all 16 to 19-year-old programme. And modernisation of the career service was also a recommendation of the Smith Group from its earliest time, and focusing on those young people who are now identified as Amber. Presiding Officer, these businessmen didn't give up their time and money because everything was hunky-dory. The system wasn't working for a great many of young people who needed most help, and that included the way we delivered careers advice. And that was made clear by none other than Jack McConnell himself, when in February 2006, a government press release announcing the establishment of the Smith Group said, and I quote, "Additional careers advice based in school, targeted on those who need it most, is an essential part of the way governments should move forward." The Smith Group said that it believed effective targeting based on reliable evidence supported the case for significant levels of investment in those parts of Scotland where the NEET problem was highest. The population of young people is who are classified as NEET is most likely to become highly dependent on the public sector throughout their adult lives, and early intervention can make a profound difference to their life chances. Presiding Officer, early intervention has been a byword of this government's approach to service delivery, and it applies to the career service as much as it does to other areas of government policy, such as early years education. This approach is already having a positive effect on the problem identified by the Smith Group. Figures published in June show that of pupils leaving school in 2010-11, the percentage of these in positive destinations by March 2012 was 87.2%, up from 85.2% the previous year, a record high. Of course, Presiding Officer, we must not forget the majority of our youngsters who are in the 100,000 group of green classified young people who will benefit from careers advice throughout the school curriculum, through the Curriculum for Excellence and through the website My World of Work, as well as engagement with professional careers advisors, if that is what they want. I was very encouraged to hear Malcolm Barron of Skills Development Scotland tell the committee this week that there is no single solution for each young person, and that careers professionals will work with teachers to deliver careers advice through things like group sessions and PSE classes. No young person who wants an interview will be denied one, and a point made repeatedly by the Minister and Skills Development Scotland in committee. Presiding Officer, I too was concerned about the allegations that young people may be unable to access one-to-one careers advice, but I'm now absolutely satisfied that that is not the case. I also I noted a number of people quoting the Unison survey, which we're still to see. It seems that it's not the most extensive survey, although, once we had the opportunity to examine it, may advise that view. But I did my own survey by calling the local college in my area, Dumfries and Galloway, and the feedback from there on the website from both staff and young people was very positive. One young person said the website was very helpful, it's easy to understand and sorts everything out with a step-by-step guideline for you, and I would use it again in the future. Another said, I used it loads recently for my strengths and weaknesses, my CV is also on there and I will use it in future for accessing this. And the staff feedback was also very positive. We do use it a lot, said one staff member, and it's great as the students can pick up their CV, cover letter, strengths and weaknesses, and they can do it on the move with any computer. So lastly, Presiding Officer, I would like to comment on some other feedback on the website and on the modernisation of the career service. From Ken Cunningham, CB, the General Secretary of Schools Leaders Scotland. He's endorsed the approach of SDS. He says it dovetails with the wide range of support which schools are able to provide through a pupil's time in school. It recognises the sheer diversity of need and offers a wide range of support, targeting specifically those most in need at the appropriate time.
You really must conclude, please.
I'm happy to conclude with the words of Ken Cunningham, who I think endorses the modernisation of the career service very effectively.
John Pentland, to be followed by George Adam.
Presiding Officer, youth unemployment is a huge problem at the moment and it's getting worse. In my Motherwell and Wishaw constituency, there are over 3,000 16 to 24-year-olds unemployed. Young people need help. They need help to make the right choices about their futures, getting qualifications, acquiring skills and applying for jobs. We're not convinced that right help was being provided. A few months ago, I looked into the local career service being offered by SDS, and I was not happy with what I found. For example, the local careers office is hidden away in Motherwell College without any signposting. Now, with thousands of young people in North Lanarkshire not in education, employment or training, and not to mention cutbacks in the college sector, it occurred to me that this may not be the most convenient location. Now, compounding that with the 20% reduction in frontline staff, I doubted that face-to-face access provided by those staff could be replaced by pushing young people towards web access and centralised careers provision. I also had a look at the My World of Work website. It had one phone number on the contact page, but even that was a helpline for using the website, not actually putting people in touch with someone who could give careers advice. Searching the site for Motherwell or Wishaw, we turned a couple of courses at the college, but surprise, surprise, there was no link to the local careers advice office, which was based in the college. Was this, Minister, your vision to be an improvement to the service? It also came as no surprise to discover that locally only 14% of the young people have registered on My World of Work. 14%, 1 in 7, and that proves to me that the plan is not working. So can the Minister explain why SDS is not cooperating with academics, conducting research into the new web-based service? And what are the Minister's views on their previous research carried out for SDS? It has been identified that there are shortcomings in the system, and I think, and I hope the Minister will agree, that SDS should work with anyone who can help address the problems or improve the system. Now, having visited my constituency's local careers office in Motherwell College, I was more convinced than ever that careers advice should be easily accessible for all, and that means somewhere central where people can go and speak face to face with an advisor. The staff who I spoke with appreciated these concerns, and so I decided to approach the Council to see if they could help identify suitable premises in either Motherwell or Worcester Town Centre. Now, when SDS were put in the spot, the inaccessibility of the service was clear, particularly with the 14% signing up for My World of Work. The weakness of the web-based solution cannot be denied. SDS agreed to work with the Council. Now, I am pleased to say that this has borne fruit with the career service now lined up to occupy part of the one-stop shop in Motherwell. Now, of course, this victory for common sense is only part of what needs to be done, and it is also very much the exception to the rule, and as has been heard from other areas. I am also concerned about the red, amber, green system that has been used to filter young people to decide who deserves attention. For many young people, this system is failing to provide support. There is an issue about whether the support offered is appropriate to the categories and whether the categories are being correctly assigned or, in some cases, even assigned at all. The web system is aimed at 75% of the 16 to 19-year-olds who are in the green category. Now, what we know of registration suggests that only a quarter of them have actually signed up. Now, while these pupils are those who fare better academically, it is a mistake to assume that translates into not needing help with careers beyond that what is provided on the World of Work website. Now, picking the right course choices and plotting out career destinations can be difficult, whatever the level of academic ability and attainment people have achieved. So where is the evidence to support SDS? And how does it compare to the evidence that they don't want to talk about? The move to an appointment system is also making life difficult for older users, with drop-in opportunities diminishing and outreach for vulnerable youngsters being put out of reach. All in all, the picture is one of a service that is perpetuating a dogma that underpins its reforms, which have been shown to be unfit for purpose. And the strong suspicion is that the dogma serves the purpose of saving money rather than serving the people.
Thank you. We're now getting a bit tight for time, and I've only got a little bit of leeway for interventions. George Adams, to be followed by Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Most of us during this debate, in one way or another, have actually said how important the career service is and how important it is that we get it right. I do believe that the proposals here are the correct way to go and are a way that we can get things right. It's already been mentioned that the days of a one-size-fits-all career service are now over, and at the new heart of the new career service is the fact that the individual is the most important. The claim that the new career service does not meet the needs of young people is completely unfounded, and the new approach rolled out in September this year and is progressing well. I mentioned earlier that the days of one-size-fits-all career service is over, and like Mr Finlay, I remember, probably before Mr Finlay, a long time ago in the historic town of Paisley, standing there at the careers office and having my 10-minute interview with the career guidance teacher as well. And during that time, obviously saying I wanted to be an astronaut was probably a wee bit ambitious and probably lost the person's interest, but I was a rather stroppy teenager at the time and rather headstrong. Mr Stevenson's, he remembers me from then, so that's why he's agreeing. You know, then take that forward to about 3 years ago when a young woman from Paisley, Jessica Adam, my daughter, strong-willed young woman, went into the career service again, and she too had difficulty engaging with the service and making sure that she could actually move things forward. Luckily, things for Jessica worked out, but it shows you how important. There's been so much said about the traffic light system. It's important that we make sure that we don't leave anyone behind regardless of their background. And in many cases, when we're talking about the traffic light system, it's naive to say that everyone should have the same system, because there's people from very difficult backgrounds who quite clearly, if we don't get them at that stage and it's not part of the curriculum for excellence, we're going to lose, and we're going to end up making sure that they don't have the fulfilled career that they deserve and should have. So the career guidance is now much more tailored to the need of the individual. Any young person who wants a face-to-face appointment, and can I say that again, any young person who wants a face-to-face appointment with a career guidance professional can get one. So in Scotland we're fortunate to have these professional careers information and advice guidance staff. And I think if you look at how young people deal with things nowadays, interacting through a web page is a lot easier for many of them as well, because I know between phones and the web, many of them can actually get access for absolutely anything that way as well. So I think we have to ensure that we go down that route. Some young people have already mentioned, with regards to traffic light systems, need extra intensive support, and this system provides that. It provides an opportunity for a lot of young people getting that extra support should they need it, and that's the most important thing. That's the thing we must remember. I think most of us in this chamber are all agreed that we want to do what's best for Scotland's young people and make sure that they have a full and fulfilled life. But I think we have to maybe just sit there and start to agree on the actual trying to make systems like this work, because I think that is the important part as well. And the fact that there needs to be tailored for individuals, the Minister's already said, the workplace has dramatically changed over the past few years, and flexibility needs to be a part of the service. The system needs to ensure that all of Scotland's people have an opportunity to get opportunity, almost into a Francine Joseph part there, get a universal career service, you know, integrated into part of the curriculum of excellence. This can and will make a dramatic difference. You know, just to put some of the scare tactics away, and let's have a mature, open debate here, is young people falling through the net. Any young person, as I've already said, who wants an appointment can get one with a careers advisor. And at the Education Committee, SDS's Malcolm Barron said, "The group is fixed. I do not want the committee to get the idea that we're simply putting a stamp on someone, and that is that. It's all about working with the school to target the best possible support at the people who need it." Yes.
Kezia Dugdale.
I've listened to the member's speech for 4 minutes now, Presiding Officer, and I'm really surprised considering that long-term youth unemployment in the member's constituency is 386% higher than it was just a year ago, that he isn't using his speech to challenge his government to do something about the lack of jobs in his constituency.
George Adam.
With the greatest respect, I am actually defending the good people of Paisley by supporting the Minister and the ideas to make a difference. This is exactly what I said earlier on. If we don't actually look at an idea, there's no point in the negativity from the Labour benches and actually saying that nothing can actually work. We have to actually get here, and our job is to ensure that we can actually make things better and make the thing work. You know, give us something constructive. Don't just say it's negative. I will, since it's Mr Finlay.
Neil Finlay.
Thanks very much. Does the member realise that there's only 11% or 12% in his constituency who are registered?
George Adam.
And as I already said, the system has actually been up and running since September. Things are moving on and is progressing as time goes on. We have to ensure that we make these things work. Now, are we going to sit here and are we going to argue for 2.5 hours and get absolutely nowhere? Or are we actually going to actually build something where we can make the people of young people in Paisley and the rest of Scotland an opportunity to move things forward? I think that's what the Labour Party forgets, and they actually let politics get in the way of actually delivering for the people of Scotland. So, Presiding Officer, for me, the modernisation of the career service is another example of the Scottish Government's commitment to Scotland's young people, ensuring they have the opportunity to succeed and find a career path that suits them. We must be focused on our young people and support them in their future endeavours. The current generation of teenagers and future generations are the most important people in this. So let's not let any of us in this room lose sight of that.
Thank you. I now call Liam MacArthur to be followed by Jamie Hepburn.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. For a while, this debate looked like it might fall victim to the controversy surrounding the Scottish Government's cuts to the college budgets and the need to make time for that issue to be debated. I am pleased, however, that the Minister has persevered and, in the words of George Adam, welcomed the opportunity to participate in this important debate on the modernisation of Scotland's career services. The need for such modernisation is not hard to justify, I believe, given the way in which the world of work has changed and continues to change. As Scottish Chamber of Commerce observed, those leaving our schools, colleges and universities now and in the future will, quote, enter into careers which will cross multiple disciplines in several industries. The roles they perform in the industries in which they do so may not now yet even exist. This presents enormous challenges for those tasked with developing the skills of our young people and those returning to update their skills, but it also places a weighty burden on those responsible for providing careers information, advice and guidance. In that sense, I think Angela Constance, in her motion and in her remarks this afternoon, is right to underline the rationale for the changes that are being made. She is right also to link this modernisation process not simply with ensuring Scotland emerges strongly from the current economic difficulties, but that we prepare people to manage their careers throughout their lives. And she is right to highlight the importance of collaboration with a wide range of partners in achieving the most effective career service possible. Where I disagree and therefore find difficulty in supporting the Government's motion as it stands is in the failure to acknowledge any of the concerns that exist in relation to the strategy and, in particular, the way in which it is being implemented. These, I think, are reflected well in Neil Findlay's amendment, albeit that perhaps more of the original motion could have survived the cut for the reasons I've already mentioned. Nevertheless, having acknowledged the shared understanding about the need for change and how it might be best achieved, let me expand a bit on where I think the problems in approach and/or execution arise and how they might be addressed. From a constituency perspective, I remain concerned at what appears to have been a centralisation of service provision. Certain senior roles have been removed from the islands, and while attempts have been made to try to mitigate the impact of this, I believe there has been a move in the wrong direction. Unison, in their briefing, reflect on the wider problem of office closures and staff cuts across the country. Quite reasonably, they contrast this trend with the increasing demand being placed on the service at a time of high unemployment. This in part leads Unison to claim that the changes being made are driven by a desire to cut budgets rather than improve service. And whether or not this is fair or accurate is largely academic. It is clearly the perception of a large number of staff involved in the career service whose morale, by all accounts, is worryingly low. Morale is also being affected by the approach being taken to use of the My World of Work website. The problem is not the website itself. Scottish Chambers of Commerce are far from being alone in recognising that My World of Work is, and I quote, an excellent innovation, bringing together advice and information in a single portal. Appearing before the Education Committee last month, Unison representatives accepted this fact. However, serious concerns remain that SDS management, if not the Minister, still see this web tool as a replacement for one-to-one careers advice for too many of our young people, as well as for those who have left school. The research by Hewison and Semple, referred to by a number of members, demonstrates that while, quote, young people do indeed value self-help services, they also wish for personal contact and advice. They go on to point out that while comfortable in using the internet, many young people find it challenging to interpret the volume and complexity of the information available, and importantly, how this relates to their own personal circumstances. This can affect even very able and confident young people, as well as those already identified as needing more intensive support. Moreover, it seems a little premature for SDS and ministers to be making some of the more extravagant claims about what My World of Work can deliver before more road testing is done first, ideally by young people themselves. However, despite reassurances that a flexible approach is being adopted, school-based careers resources are being focused according to the so-called risk matrix. Those in the red category are to receive 6 to 8 face-to-face sessions, while those categorised as green are expected to sign up to the website, something, as Neil Bibby and others have pointed out, a relatively modest number have actually done. In evidence to the Education Committee, Unison confirmed that advisers are still offering interviews to proposed green pupils, even where they're not registered on the website, insisting that advisers, quote, will not turn people away when they seek help just because they have registered on a website. Quite right too. Danny Logue of SDS agreed that no young person should be discouraged from seeking advice, yet guidance to advisers has not changed, and the firm impression remains that registering on the website is a prerequisite for getting one-to-one advice. If this is wrong, as Ms Constance and others have argued, it is time that ministers insist that SDS make this more explicit both within the organisation and communicated through schools. Before closing, can I briefly make a couple of points in relation to the critically important careers advice available in our colleges and universities. In the case of the latter, I welcome the steps being taken to build in careers advice from the outset of a student's time at university. This may take time to bed down, but is certainly a sensible approach and perhaps avoids an over-reliance on the final year milk round. In terms of colleges, one of the many concerns about the significant cut in budgets has been the reduction in staff available to provide guidance and career support, and another reason why I believe there must be a rethink by ministers before the budget is finally approved. Deputy Presiding Officer, the Minister opened by reminding us that this debate is about getting the right people with the right skills in the right jobs. I believe this is achievable and it will require change. However, I hope the Minister will reflect on the concerns that I and many others have made in order to ensure that we make the right changes in the right way and for the right reasons. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now call on Jamie Hepburn to be followed by Colin Beattie. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, President Officer. And can I welcome today's debate? I think the importance of ensuring that young people, any person, getting the necessary advice that they may want, they may seek, to help them make informed decisions about the career path for them is something that we can all surely agree on. And I think probably all of those of us taking part in this debate might have thought back to our own experience of careers guidance and preparation for today's debate, and some others have already mentioned that. My own experience involved one face-to-face interview, and it seemed to work out okay for me, which tells me I was obviously a far less obstinate teenager than either Mr Finlay or Mr Adam, but that's probably no surprise to me at any rate. But I do wonder if that type of approach would be as appropriate or work as well in these times, because after all the world is somewhat different than it was then, and this is a point that is made by the Scottish Chambers of Commerce in their briefing to us in advance of today's debate. They say the young people graduating from Scotland's schools, colleges and universities today and in future are entering into a world of work unrecognisably different to that which they would have encountered a generation ago. So I do think it is appropriate then that we have to ensure that career guidance now is much more tailored to the needs of the individual. I think the point has been made, but it's worth repeating that some people are going to need more intensive support than others. And I know that the web-based approach, the My World of Work website, is coming for some criticism, but I would have thought it would have been somewhat odd in these days not to be utilising the internet for careers advice. I think it's absolutely right to use that as part of the approach. I mean, again, I think back to my own experience. I was at the tail end of my school experience. I remember being introduced to this thing. It wasn't called the internet then, it was called the information superhighway and email, and I thought it was a load of bunkum and I would never need to use it, which probably explains why I'm not an internet millionaire, or at least in part explains why I'm not an internet millionaire. But I make the point, I suppose, because if I was at school now, my experience would be radically different, because I would have grown up with that technology. So I would have thought it would be particularly peculiar if we weren't using the internet as a key component of any careers service. But lest we think that is the only approach, and I think, because I would be very worried if anyone watching, any young person seeking careers guidance watching this debate, felt that that was the only approach being taken for careers advice. I think we should emphasise the point. It has been made that any young person seeking a face-to-face interview for careers guidance with a career guidance professional can get one. So I have to say, I think this new approach is one that we should be getting behind. And I have to say, if it isn't working, well, I would observe I've not had a single, I'm not aware of a single constituent, no young person, no parent, no teacher contacting me to express their concern about this new approach. And whilst that can't tell us everything, I think it has to at least tell me something about what's happening on the ground. I return to the... briefly.
Elizabeth Smith.
Notwithstanding what the member has just said, would you accept that at the committee there were significant concerns about the extent of that service that's being provided?
Well, I'm not on the committee, so I've not looked at everything that's looked at in detail. Listen, I think it's absolutely right to assess the scheme, but I think we should observe that this is a new approach, and certainly in terms of the new website, the My World of Work website, it's only been very recently promoted within schools, so it's very early days. And this idea that we've got low registration, I mean, I think the point was well made in terms of if we judge the success of the career service by merely the amount of registration, then we're looking at the wrong thing. We're looking at the input rather than the output. But we're still in early days, and of course we need to look at it and make sure it is working. But I think it is right that we look at this time to modernise the careers service. I think I go back to the point I've made that we are in very different times than we were with the former approach. So it's absolutely right to look at a new approach. Can I focus on the My World of Work website? I think this is a good development because it is, of course, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for people to access, and that is clearly not going to be the case with face-to-face interviews. If that was the only thing as you were relying on, as might have been previously the case. And I would like to focus on the issue of registrations, because I think the point was made. It was made by Gordon MacDonald, and I've just pointed out myself that the rollout of this website is only very recent. It only began in September of this year. If we were looking for 100% registration, I think we'd have been setting ourselves up for a fall in the first place. And I would like to reiterate the point made by Gordon MacDonald. Between 31st of October and the 29th of November, we saw an increase of 11.6% in terms of registrations. I think that's something we should welcome. To have a little leeway, Presiding Officer?
Very little.
Okay, in that case, let me just also say that even if it was the case that people are arguing that it's all about the web, it's clearly not the case. We've got the SDS helpline. We also have the possibility of face-to-face interview. This is a multifaceted approach. I think that's got to be right. And then let me just conclude by talking about the traffic light system very briefly. I think it's peculiar that it's been criticised by the Labour Party because its very purpose is, and I think Joe McAlpin made this point, it's designed to support those identified in the greatest need. I would have thought that would have been something they would have welcomed. I'd urge them to ditch their negativity and get behind a career service fit for the modern age.
Many thanks. Now call on Colin Beattie to be followed by Ian Gray.
Presiding Officer, I am pleased to be given the opportunity to speak on Skills Development Scotland and especially on My World of Work. I find this an innovative and modern approach to career advising, and I myself enjoyed visiting the website and taking the visual My DNA quiz, which described my aptitudes, and I'm glad to know that there are still some options open to me, but you never know where you'll end up in this fast-moving world. Skills Development Scotland's best placed to make effective changes after successfully delivering 26,427 modern apprenticeships and supporting 165,578 young people through face-to-face career services. Supporting 54,082 active learners through individual learning accounts and 13,017 individuals dealing with redundancy. I think that's quite a formidable record. SDS is the key organisation driving the modernisation efforts. Availability of professional career guidance, information and advice available to any who desire it is tremendously important. The groundbreaking skills website is one of many of the ways in which SDS will continue to provide exceptional service. Most importantly, My World of Work, along with the contact centre and face-to-face interviews, will allow SDS greater flexibility in supporting youths and tailored guidance to the specific needs of individual young people. The modernisation of career services will assist SDS in providing both quality and quantity of support. While any young person will be able to request a face-to-face appointment with a careers advisor, it will no longer be the quick 10-minute appointment of past days. The services will be personalised and focused. No two young people are alike. Planning for the future should not be a cookie-cutter service. Some individuals are going to need thorough and intensive support. The new range of support options will allow for singular needs to be met. My World of Work is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm always impressed at how young people are becoming ever more technologically savvy. Having a cutting-edge career system, and cutting-edge is what many of our young people are in terms of IT skills, it's absolutely essential, and in fact it's the only thing that makes sense. I mentioned earlier my visit to My World of Work site. The quiz I took was only one of many services available. Users can plan their careers by looking at a range of information on various training opportunities, including video clips. It even includes ways to find a job using social media, which I can imagine will well appeal to the Facebook and Twitter generation. Access is not just increased by it being available all the time. It also allows SDS to reach more people in remote locations. As I said before, a higher quality and a greater quantity of service will be provided. In my constituency, I've met with many young people in secondary schools who are determined and have bright futures, and I believe that most young people are like those I have met. That is why the traffic light system makes sense. There are going to be young people who have a plan in mind and will use the tools of my world of work to further develop their ideas and career goals. The traffic light system enables SDS to provide different support levels as required. Again, the system has been designed to better tailor services to the needs of the individual young person. Any individual is able to request a face-to-face meeting with a careers advisor, but those who are in the red category and those who are most at risk will receive the attention they desperately need. No student will be stuck in one category forever. They are not permanently fixed. Career services need to be triaged. Those in the most need receive the most personal support. But I doubt that those who are in the red or amber category have backgrounds which create an environment which enables them to make swift or confident decisions on their future. As a member of the Education and Culture Committee, I was pleased to have the opportunity to hear from Skills Development Scotland. It's clear that the new approach is better placed to give all the opportunities to succeed. The programme was only rolled out in September of this year, and by the 31st October, there were already 134,629 registrations, and over 70,000 of that number were young people 12 to 19. A month later, the total had risen by 11.6% to 150,240 registrations. This programme is in its infancy, and while the number of registrations will certainly increase over the coming months, the success will not be determined immediately, as it will be measured by the ability of young people to achieve their desired careers. A record number of pupils are moving into positive destinations, 87.2%, and the Scottish Government is doing everything it can in its power to tackle youth unemployment. And while we may not be as bad as our neighbours like Spain, where under 24 unemployment is running at 55.9%, we can all agree it is too high. The Scottish Government's Opportunities for All initiative gives young people between 16 and 19 a training or educational opportunity if they desire one. Between 2007 to the end of the spending review period, the SNP government will have invested £5 billion in colleges. The SNP promised to deliver 25,000 modern apprenticeships per year of this Parliament. The target was exceeded, delivering 26,427 modern apprenticeships. 55% of our 16 to 24-year-olds are employed, compared to the national average of 51%. Completion rates for modern apprenticeships are at the record level of 75%. The Government is dedicated to providing career advising and guidance that ensures partnership with organisations that will give high-quality services across a range of careers. This is made evident through the single outcome agreements, working with employers and supporting SDS. It is no longer the case that individuals will be in only one job for a lifetime. We are in the midst of an era of opportunity where changing one's job stream is the trend rather than the exception to the rule, and our career services need to be prepared to help individuals track their careers through their lifetime to unleash their potential. The SDS and Scottish Government are doing just that by modernising the current system. Presiding Officer, I look forward to visiting the schools in my constituency and speaking to young people about the resources available to them. I will definitely be advising them to take the My DNA quiz, as I have done, and I commend this also to my fellow MSPs who may gain an insight into alternative opportunities for the future.
Thank you very much. I now call on Ian Gray to be followed by Stuart Stevenson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Most speakers have referred to the importance of careers advice, and I think that's right for any of us, and I think most of us do believe this, who believe that this nation's greatest resource is its people, and particularly its young people. Then the career service is right at the centre of helping them to achieve their potential. And that's not just about fitting them into the right place, it's also about opening young people's eyes and raising their aspirations. I remember the entrepreneur Tom Hunter telling a story once about where he grew up in Ayrshire, where in his village everybody worked in the pits. If you were working class, you went down the pit. If you were middle class, you worked in the office. But you worked in the pits. And when the pits closed, it wasn't just that there were no jobs, it was that the community couldn't conceive of how you could actually earn a living. I'm a teacher for similar reasons. First person in my family to go to university and join a profession. And so many of us in that position became teachers, because people aspire to the things that they are familiar with. And as a teacher, I found that too. I well remember arguing with a young guy who was better at physics than I ever was, who wanted to go to college, and trying to get him to go to university. And he was adamant that he did not know anyone who went to university, and he would not go. Or a young woman who wanted to be a nurse, trying to convince her that she could in fact aspire to be a doctor. And sometimes that advice is about actually turning your back on opportunities. I also remember on a later occasion when I worked in Livingston, in the last recession in fact, when youth unemployment was high, when Ferrantes suddenly took on 100 apprentices, and my higher physics class disappeared in its entirety. Now, many of those in that class could have aspired to university, Highers University, and so on, but they felt they had to take the chance that was presented to them. But careers is also important, of course, in trying to make sure that we have the skills that we need in our economy. And even in these difficult times, there are areas of skill shortages, particularly in areas such as science and engineering. And there are still opportunities in those areas. The Institute of Physics recently produced a report showing that there were 190,000 jobs in Scotland in physics-based sectors. And there is a particular gap here, which nobody has referred to.
McAlpine.
For accepting my intervention, and I agree with his point about the need for engineering and the skills gap there. Does he agree with Dr. Peter Hughes, the Chief Executive of Scottish Engineering, who said we welcome the proposals with regard to the delivery of career management skills in the classroom and group-based career management skills for pupils, with coaching for all pupils deemed to be at risk? And we'll do whatever we can to assist you, that is Skills Development Scotland, in your endeavours.
Okay, thank you.
I find myself almost always agreeing with Dr. Peter Hughes, but I want for the moment to focus on a particular issue around STEM subjects, which nobody has referred to, and where I think careers guidance has a role, and that is around gender stereotyping and self-limiting choices that young women often make. One group who do not access those opportunities are young women. There are only 28% of standard grade physics students who are women, and if you look at engineering, only 15% at undergraduate level who are women. So there are opportunities there which career guidance should be moving young women into. So my experience is this, that career guidance is about opening and changing minds. That it is necessary, not just at school. Those people who went to Ferrantes, I think, have looked for career guidance later in life. It is not just for low achievers. That it does need to be early, and this, I think, is what Dr. Hughes was referring to. It needs to be early, it needs to be consistent, and it needs to be proactive, because those gender stereotypes, for example, are set very early in life. But above all, I think it needs to be face-to-face. And a number of members have spoken about the importance of individualised, personalised service in careers guidance. There is nothing more individualised or personalised than a sensitive professional listening carefully to the person they are dealing with and responding to them in a way which is appropriate to their needs. That is individualisation and personalisation. And I was astonished that the Minister, without a trace of irony, told us that we shouldn't worry about those 92% of SDS staff who were cynical about the new system, because they had all had high-quality face-to-face interventions on the new system. And that is the best way to change people's minds. So the issue is this new system fit for those purposes? And I think we've seen a weight of evidence today that it's not. The traffic light model is excluding 100,000 higher achievers from the frontline service that they need. The World of Work website demonstrates sign-up rates which have to be a cause of concern. In my own constituency, it's only 15%, even less than the average. And I think that what we have here is a trend in government, because this approach using the internet is analogous to other approaches which are developing elsewhere. Benefits applicants expected to apply online. And in the preparations for the introduction of self-directed care, local authority social work departments who are planning to create web-based choices for the disabled and elderly trying to create their own care packages. I think we know what is happening here. These are the kind of things which sound plausible in an organisational change management presentation, but they leave those at the sharp end frustrated, ill-served or downright excluded. I don't think the career service was perfect before, but the evidence is that the changes we have discussed are not an enhancement. We should pause, re-examine them and get this right.
Thanks very much. Now call on Stuart Stevenson, after which we'll move to closing speeches.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I may just be one of a tiny minority of people who benefited from having no contact with the formal careers advice. As a youngster, I was not very well and missed a fair bit of my primary education. And the most important bit that I missed was the classes in learning how to learn from the education system. It's a skill I absolutely flunked. But I was very fortunate to have well-educated parents and to be brought up in a house absolutely full of a diverse range of books, which I simply devoured in random order. I read J.D. Mackey's History of Scotland when I was 5. I read a biography of Lloyd George when I was 7. It probably shows that we are what we read. So my reading and my inquiring mind enabled me to just about muddle through. I'll wait a little, but I will come back to you, to eventually graduate with a modest degree in mathematics. Had I actually had a good degree, I'd have been headhunted for traditional civil service, ICIBP or whatever. My girlfriend, now my spouse of 43 years, was the person who consulted the University Careers Advisory Service, and right at the end of my academic career, the advice filtered to me that I should go into computers. Best move I ever made. But throughout my career, I got there by chance. Neil Finlay.
Neil Finlay.
Given that I know that the member has had a very exciting career and he's been a pilot, a water bailiff and invented the computer, maybe the answer is that we don't give careers advice and we just let them read about Winston Churchill and everything when they're 5 years old?
Oh, no. Actually, I use the individual example to illustrate that I've been incredibly lucky by not having the advice, and that luck should not play a part in the lives of children across Scotland, because such a casual attitude to careers advice that was adequate and was good enough for me in the 1950s and the 1960s absolutely is no longer adequate today. There are more careers, there are more prescriptive rules about entry to careers that mean that people need qualifications, they need to have studied subjects. And to do that, you may have 10 years in advance of acquiring a qualification to have had the kind of guidance which I thought Ian Gray talked about from a very informed basis quite early in your career, in a way which I neither got nor, as luck would have it, required. What I think is clear, too, is that having a single skill is risky. And again, Ian Gray made reference to that. We have to learn how to learn, and we have to learn how to adapt. The first law of epigenetics is the more highly optimised an organism is for one environment, the more adversely it is affected by change in that environment. A village that's all in coal, when coal as an industry goes away, perfectly illustrates the risk. And good careers advice can pinpoint potential in a student that those close to them, or even the student themselves, simply isn't going to spot. So today's students are very different from the student I was. Now, they have keyboard skills, they work computers as extensions of themselves. I, again, was typing by the age of 8 and 9, but I didn't use a telephone for the first time till I was 15, which might seem rather odd, but the telephone was a much rarer beast to which I had less access than the computer. The moody teenager wasn't just Neil Findlay, it was me, and I'll bet if we compared photographs I was spottier than him, and that's an unusual claim to make. Actually, the last thing as a teenager that I would have wanted is somebody looking over my shoulder. I was adapted to private study. I was adapted to doing things for myself. And for many children, that's why online systems, comprehensive in detail, timely in content, and this is the key point I think missing from the debate so far, personalised for individuals by being an interactive system. Not as the first websites were 20 years ago when I produced my first one, simply an electronic library with no way to find around. I will.
Yes, Dr.
The member would rather have an algorithm or a one-to-one conversation.
Rather we indulged in heuristic learning, where the computer adds to the available ways in which we can learn of the needs of the person sitting at the computer, in addition to the interactions with human beings. Computers are going to be part of people's lives to come. The World Wide Web is going to develop and become even more important. Its interactivity is the vital thing. Its ability to guide, to search and to respond to people is absolutely vital. Personalisation is important. And let me just give you one little insight into how we may be making some wrong assumptions about people's relationships with technology. When we, in the Bank of Scotland, that I worked for 30 years in technology, introduced our first cash dispensers in 1980, my brother had developed them for the Royal Bank 3 years earlier, so I was behind him. We found that people would stand in the rain to queue for a cash dispenser rather than go into a bank branch. And there were 3 times higher usage per head of population in Scotland than in England. We did a survey. Why? People would rather not share intimate things in their lives with somebody behind a counter. They'd rather deal with a machine. Now, that's a very narrow, specific example. It need not map to the subject that's before us here. But I think we should not, by any means, discount the electronic world. I'd finally close, Presiding Officer, by just a word about the RAG system. I do feel very disappointed. In essence, what I'm hearing is divert resources from the red group who need it most to the green group who can be more adaptable, can start online and get the human interaction when they need it. Delighted to participate in this very important debate today, Presiding Officer.
Many thanks. Many thanks. Now call on Mary Scanlon, 7 minutes, please.
Well, following Stuart Stevenson is never easy, but here we go. This has been an interesting debate. We are, in fact, in the rare position of agreeing with the government motion that modernisation of Scotland's career services is vital to economic recovery. How could we not? We also agree with Labour that the web-based system should be complementary to face-to-face careers advice and not a replacement. And as my colleague Liz Smith highlighted, the significant progress that could be made on the basis of a more personalised careers guidance. And Liz also mentioned a critical point in her amendment, which I hope will gain support across the Chamber, regarding the early discussion of careers options in schools in order to choose the subjects appropriate to that career. I'm not on the Education Committee, but I can only say, following my intervention with the Minister, if Unison have misunderstood the web-based approach, then the misunderstanding of the web-based approach was also shared by many, many people giving evidence at the Education Committee. And, you know, I would have actually had more respect for the Minister if she'd said, we acknowledge that there are concerns and we will address these concerns. But instead, what we've had is the basis of evidence from the Labour Party and total denial here. And I don't think that's helpful. I do think that Liam MacArthur made a very thoughtful and measured speech, and I think it was really along these lines. My career as an economics lecturer before coming here, and like Stuart Stevenson, I had no careers advice, but I chose lecturing because I was a single parent with 2 very young children, and I chose it in order to spend the school holidays with my children. It turned out to be a very enjoyable and rewarding career. However, I do remember looking at a careers website as a student at Dundee University, along with some friends from my class. This website was obviously not as sophisticated as the new systems we have today. But one question asked, do you like people? Well, we all said yes. They're okay, you know. And the careers advice was, we should all be social workers. And I thoroughly respect and admire the work that social workers do, but it was a further coincidence that when we got back to the lecture theatre, we asked the rest of the year if they'd taken the same careers advice, and they said yes, we like people as well, so we were all advised to be social workers. But I make this point on the basis of the need for a more personalised system to suit individual needs and talents. The 31,000 young people who are currently not in education, employment and training may also hugely benefit from face-to-face careers advice as opposed to facing a computer screen. I also support better careers advice as I saw many mature students coming into further and higher education after years in low-paid jobs with no career progression as a result of little or no careers advice and support at school. But in order to equip our career services to move people towards employment, it is important that they're able to steer people towards the parts of the economy where there is a demand for jobs. I welcome the Skills Academy at Nick in the Highlands and the Aberdeen model, both of which are long overdue, but nonetheless will work to achieve a much better match of skills, industry and needs. Recent research into skills shortages in the energy sector highlighted the need for about 120,000 new recruits by 2022 if Aberdeen is to realise and continue as a global energy hub. The Unison briefing is helpful, and I do note the point they make about information and advice. There is no shortage of information online, as Neil Bibby and others have said, but this is quite distinct from a face-to-face discussion on careers advice. And I hope that the 93% of SDS staff, this cannot be ignored. If the staff that are offering the careers advice, whether it's 10%, 20%, 30% or 50%, if 93% disagree that this model will result in enhanced service, I just want the government to say, we listen to that. We hear what they're saying, rather than dismiss it. I would like to congratulate the work done by Energy North in the Highlands, bringing together businesses from throughout the Highlands and working with the UHI, Highland Council, Job Centre Plus, colleges, OPITO. But they have identified a need to match education and training to the needs of the energy industry. This organisation is desperately needed given opportunities in oil, gas and renewables and the lack of good advice and career guidance. Energy North are also working with schools and colleges. And I think Ian Gray made a very good point. It's a point I've made before. And that is about female pupils and graduates. And I think that females need to be given the appropriate options and career advice. I think it is sad that today there's 15 fewer women working offshore in the North Sea than there were in 2007, with only 5% of offshore engineers women. This industry offers great opportunities, and it's only right that women are given the advice, access and the confidence to take advantage of these opportunities. Presiding Officer, my last point is to use this debate to highlight careers which do require more prominence and respect. And I refer mainly to the hospitality industry. The perception remains of an industry for students, part-time staff. Yet in recent years, Scottish food, drink and hospitality has achieved worldwide success, rising exports, Scotland as a destination for tourist visitors, employing 200,000 people and a total spend close to 11 billion. And whilst we in this chamber regularly welcome the jobs and the economic benefits, we rarely take time to praise the professionalism and the commitment of staff who make this happen, and given the contribution of tourism to our economy. And I would hope that career services in future will not be dismissive about the retail sector, the hospitality sector. There are careers there, just as there are in other professions. So, finally, my Deputy Presiding Officer, I support the Labour amendment and the Government's strategy up to a point, but we will vote for it. And we live in hope that ministers will take on board the many reasonable and constructive points made in this debate today.
Many thanks. Now call on Kezia Dugdale. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. At Julian College, just along the road, there are 1,800 full-time students and just under 8,000 learners overall. I understand that there is just one member of SDS staff left there who's there for 1.5 days a week, a huge reduction in the service in the last 12 months alone. It's not just colleges where SDS are scaling back their services. Offices are closing down, and where they remain open, opening hours are reduced and premises are being moved into job centres. At first glance, that seems like a good thing, but when read against the changing practices of the DWP and how job centres work, it's actually devastating, because of course many job centres operate on an appointment-only basis. I've spoken to countless young people who find going to the job centre incredibly intimidating, especially when the first thing you're faced with when you go to the job centre is a security guard asking why you are there. I mention that, Presiding Officer, because we can't ignore the wider context of this debate and the wider context of SDS service revision. I've heard numerous SNP speakers somehow bemused as to why Labour would oppose the RAG system, that's the red, amber, green system, because, as Jamie Hepburn put it, it's designed to focus on those in need. Let me take a moment to explain to Jamie Hepburn and others just exactly why we hold that view. The Unison briefing notes that the vast majority of drop-ins at career centres were diagnosed as needing one-to-one advice help. 80% in some instances had an identified need. I've got the 2009 annual report for Skills Development Scotland, which boasts that 242,000 young people dropped in. If you apply Unison's evidence of 80% of those people needing help, what you get to is a figure of 193,600 one-to-ones taking place in 2009-10. SDS expect to deal with 35,000 amber clients. That's a huge reduction in service in 3 years alone. In fact, it's less than a fifth of what we had 3 years ago. It looks to me like tens of thousands of young people will simply be slipping through the net as a consequence of these changes. Of course.
Jamie Hepburn.
I thank the member for giving way. Does the member accept, though, that any person who wants a face-to-face interview will get it?
Kezia Dugdale.
I accept that, but I'll come on to why that's misguided in a second, Mr Hepburn. Face-to-face contact goes hand in hand with the website. The website should not replace those services, but that is what is happening. And can I say to Joan McAlpine, who said that 35,000 Amber Group were NEETs, can I gently say to her that NEETs is, of course, people who are not in education, employment or training. So how can 35,000 school pupils be considered NEETs?
Joan McAlpine.
I think it was quite clear from what I was saying that these young people were identified as potentially becoming in that group. That's clearly what it was about, and that's why they've been targeted. And I think she makes a rather specious point.
I'm sure the member will be going to the official report to check that and perhaps rectify it following the debate. The Minister talked about the pioneering service that My World of Work represents. And I've read across the papers ahead of today's debate, many people praise it, including the OECD and the World Bank. It's just a shame, Minister, that just 17% of pupils know that it exists. And I must say that the Minister's response to my colleague Drew Smith was particularly misleading, because you have to register on the website in order to access a number of the tools. I know this because I've had to do it myself in order to see what tools were available on the website. So I'm afraid that's just simply wrong. 83% of Drew's constituents are missing out. 88% of the kids in Edinburgh are missing out. That's 14,975 pupils in Edinburgh alone missing out as a consequence of this programme. Mary Scanlon rightly pointed out that 93% of staff at SDS surveys are unhappy with the new system, and she does not make an unreasonable expectation of the Minister simply to listen to what the union is saying. We have a Tory spokesperson here asking the Minister to listen to a trade union. Does she not understand? That is a very simple ask, and I hope that in her closing remarks that she will reflect that. And whilst we're on the topic of the Education Committee, can I just refer the Minister back to a point in the meeting of the 27th of November, which I'm sure she read before she came to the Chamber today, where one of the committee members asked SDS how much the My World of Work website cost. SDS said to the committee that they would write updating them of those details. I checked with the education clerks this morning, and they had been told by SDS that they would get a response before this debate started. I'm afraid it has not arrived with any of the Education Committee members, and I haven't seen it either. And I think that's unreasonable, actually, Presiding Officer, to be asked to debate a website without knowing simple things like how much it cost the government to produce. And I hope that she will be able to provide some information at the end of this debate. It's not, of course, the first time that I have come to the Minister and complained about how difficult it is to extract information from SDS. It happened to me over apprenticeships. It happens to many of my colleagues every time they table an FOI. I asked her in the last debate to address this, and I ask her again to look at the obfuscation and the deliberate attempts that SDS are using to stop members of the opposition having simple facts ahead of debates. Neil Bibby perhaps put this debate best when he talked about giving young people one-to-one advice allows them a decent chance of getting a job. It's not actually too much to ask, but asking for it is exactly what this government wants young people to do. SDS, an official to the Education Committee, said, if a young person finds that they are struggling, they will come forward. They have done so in the past, and there is nothing to stop them doing so now. How complacent, how arrogant. Ask any teacher, any youth worker, anybody that has any contact with young people, and you will know that if a young person is struggling, very often the last thing they will do is ask for help, and that we need a serious intervention in order to help them get forward from that point. Presiding Officer, I believe that tomorrow marks the Minister's first anniversary in her job. And there's been very little mention of that today. No cake, no party, certainly not one that Neil Findlay and I have been invited to. And I wonder if that's because... Presiding Officer, if that is because that after 12 months on the job and £18 million spent, youth unemployment is higher now than it was when the Minister took her post. And is it any surprise after this afternoon's debate, when what we've had is arrogance, complacency, a government out of touch and ill-informed, there are over 100,000 young people unemployed in Scotland today, and this Minister says everything's fine. We've got a website for that.
Thank you very much. Now call on Minister Angela Constance to wind up the debate, please. You have until 5 o'clock.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I've enjoyed very much the contributions that have been made this afternoon across the Chamber and across the political divide. But let me start by making some remarks specifically to Ms Dugdale. And all I can say is, look at this face. Every one of my 42 years and more shows. I'm the Minister for Youth Employment, mother of one child. I have 64,000 constituents, and I just don't have time to participate in playground politics. But have never in my life, as an MSP, as a Minister in this government, or indeed as a former social worker, walked around pretending that everything in life was all right. And I wonder if the Labour Party would spend as much time as they do challenging this government, something I'm quite comfortable with, as they would challenging a UK government counterparts and actually arguing for more constitutional and economic powers for this Parliament to really tackle youth unemployment. And I am proud that within my first year that I have managed to secure an additional £80 million that will help 23,000 young folk towards and into work. But I have no illusions. There is much more to do, and the Scotland that I have a vision for is a Scotland that will learn from the best and match the best in Europe. Countries like Germany, Austria, Netherlands, who despite an economic recession, despite a global economic recession, have youth unemployment of less than 10%, and that's what we should be working towards. Now, I have, as I said, enjoyed the contributions across the chamber, even some of the more idiosyncratic contributions. Pleased to hear that Mary Scanlon was advised to be a social worker. I am told that Alistair Allen was once advised to be an undertaker. But in all seriousness, I think we are fortunate in Scotland to have professionally trained, qualified career information, advice and guidance staff. We know that south of the border they've removed the funding altogether and placed a statutory responsibilities in school. But what I want to do is to maximise the impact that those professionals can have on the young lives by fully utilising the skills that careers staff possess. And there was a comment made at the Education Committee by one of the witnesses believed that they didn't expect career services to change lives. Well, I have to tell this Parliament presiding officer that I and this government are in the business of changing lives, and the expectation that we all have to have in each other as politicians and in anybody, whether they're a careers member of staff, a teacher, a social worker, a youth worker, is that anybody that has contact and influence in young lives has to be in the business of raising hopes and raising aspirations. And what an opportunity for our talented, skilled, professional careers guidance staff to work more intensively with some of our most disadvantaged young people, to have that opportunity to improve life chances and indeed to change lives. And that, to me, is actually an issue of equality and an issue of equality of opportunity, that we do need to provide more support to those young people in need. And yes, we will retain a universal baseline service where we will provide careers guidance to 130,000 young people. And can I repeat, we are not replacing face-to-face contact with a sole reliance on web-based facilities. We are working with young people. We will work with them differently, and we will work with more young people in groups. And we need to use technology not to replace people, but to extend our reach and modernise the way we work. And it does genuinely sadden me that we don't recognise that need to provide the most vulnerable with more support as a way to prevent young people becoming a neat statistic. And I think that was the point that Joan McAlpine was making this afternoon. And can I say something briefly about the red, amber, green methodology approach? It is a framework, and it's a framework for identifying and managing risk. And I know, as a former social worker who works with risky people and risky situations day in, day out, that no risk management tool ever replaces professional judgment. And in my expectations of skills development in Scotland, ultimately I expect good professional judgment and common sense to prevail. But you do need a framework to work within to try and prevent young people slipping through the net and to ensure that no one is left behind. Now, Neil Findlay, in his opening remarks, spoke of the need of evidence, and I was glad that Ms Dugdale spoke of the evidence from the OECD in 2004. We have evidence from the EU Commission, from the World Bank, and indeed the UK Commission on Employability Skills, where indeed there are commissioners who are prominent trade union members, and the UK Commission on Employability Skills is supportive of our direction of travel, as well as the former Smith Group, also mentioned by Joan McAlpine. Yes, Mr. Findlay.
Surely the most important evidence is from the people who are delivering the frontline services to the young people that need it. Surely that's the most important evidence.
Yes. Absolutely, Mr. Findlay, and I appreciate any evidence when people have the courtesy to bring that to me. I haven't seen it in full. Bring it to me, and I can assure you it will have my full, not just now, it will have my full undivided attention.
Mr. Smith.
I'm running out of time, and I do want to be helpful to members and to make progress. So let me emphasise, we have over 40 contact centres. We continue to have them. We do have a slight increase in full-time equivalent staff in schools. And we will use technology not to replace people, but to enhance our reach. And if people are concerned about registration, as I am, why don't we work together to encourage the increase in registration, the length and breadth of Scotland? Now, Presiding Officer, I'm just coming to the Conservative Party motion, and I am going to accept the Conservative Party motion today Because quite simply, it chimes with what young people themselves are telling me. They want information and advice at an earlier stage before they make their subject choices. And I also think there are huge opportunities to get career management skills actually more integrated as early as primary school provision. And we do have huge opportunities to really prepare our young people for the world of work better than ever before on the platform of Curriculum for Excellence. And Ian Gray touched on a very important point about gender stereotyping and occupational segregation. Well, gender stereotyping and occupational segregation are indeed alive and well and with us today, and the previous system of careers guidance has not helped to tackle or change that. I don't claim to have the monopoly on wisdom and how we go forward and ensure equality of opportunity for all our young women, but we will work together. We've had the first ever Women's Employment Summit. We have introduced Careers Wise, and our focus, particularly in public sector reform, has to be about tackling inequality and about early intervention and prevention. Now, I did appreciate Liam MacArthur's more reasoned, balanced comments, and can I assure Chamber that we will indeed take on constructive remarks, and I will give an undertaking to reply to every member who has contributed in this debate this afternoon to reassure them and to respond to the particular issues that they need. But in the time I have left, Presiding Officer, I want to make some remarks from a personal perspective and to make a pledge to this Parliament. I personally, politically, professionally believe that the modernisation of the career service is the right thing to do. But I hope, have the humility and the common sense to recognise and acknowledge that all change is difficult. And as I said, I or no one has monopoly of wisdom on how best to navigate our way through that change. So where there are issues of concern, and I've listened to them carefully today, I can assure this Parliament that I and this Government will indeed work in the interests of our children and young people to resolve any difficulties. And I will also pledge to this Department that I and this Government will also have the tenacity to see it through, because it's in the best interest of our young people that we have to equip them with the skills to cope and the many career changes that they're likely to have, not just to survive in this world, but to thrive, because our economy and the future of our country depends upon it.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate on the modernisation of Scotland's career service. Liam MacArthur, a point of order.
To the question I asked at First Minister's questions earlier today, I've since been told that 3 24-hour strikes have been set for the Circle North Link Northern Isles routes for the 14th, the 21st and the 28th of December. Can you perhaps advise me if there will be an early opportunity provided for the Scottish Government to update Parliament on the steps that ministers and others are taking to help resolve this potentially damaging dispute?
Ministers have not so far indicated to me that they wish to make such a statement, but the Business Bureau meets on Tuesday. I'm sure your business manager has paid attention to what you've said, and I'm quite sure that ministers also have heard your remarks, and I'm quite sure we will have a discussion about just that on Tuesday. Christine Graham, point of order.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This reference is under Standing Order Rule 1.6, referring to Code of Conduct for Members. It's in relation to comments by Joanne Lamont to the First Minister at FMQs today in respect of the case of a Mr Morrison and his inability to access cancer drugs under the current SMC regime, and also the fact that he is being charged an administrative cost for what he purchases privately. I immediately recognise that this is my constituent and is a live case currently being dealt with me, having met Mr Morrison and his wife, and I'm in correspondence with NHS Borders and the Cabinet Secretary on behalf of Mr Morrison, and indeed recently raised the issue of VAT and administrative charge at topical questions a week or so ago. The Code of Conduct states that 812 a constituent can approach any of the MSPs, whether a constituency MSP or one of the 7 regional MSPs, as the case may be, elected to represent them, as all MSPs have equal formal and legal status. 813. In the event that a member is made aware that a constituent's case is already being pursued by a constituency MSP or regional MSP, it is recommended that the member notifies that MSP. Whilst this is not a requirement of the Code of Conduct adopting such an approach, should avoid any duplication or casework of MSPs working at cross purposes, thereby damaging a constituent's case. Notification between members should only take place with the explicit consent of the constituent. 814. An MSP must not deal with a matter relating to a constituency case or constituency issue out with the member's constituency or region, as the case may be, unless by prior agreement. Presiding Officer, I seek your guidance. Ms Lamont is not a member for the South of Scotland. She did not seek my prior agreement. Indeed, and neither she nor any of the regional Labour MSPs for the South of Scotland, who may or may not have drawn her attention to this case, made any contact with me regarding this matter. Was it appropriate that she appears to be pursuing the case of Mr Morrison, who I should add is blameless in this matter? Indeed, Presiding Officer, whose prior agreement has to be sought? Thank you.
I thank the member for the advance notice of that point of order. I've been able to consider the matter briefly this afternoon. The matters raised by Christine Graham are, as she says, more appropriately raised under the Code of Conduct rather than as a point of order. Under Section 9, Volume 2 of the Code of Conduct, the members should write to me raising these issues, and I will consider them. There are 3 questions to be put as a result of today's business. The first question is amendment number 5109.2 in the name of Neil Findlay, which seeks to amend motion number 5109 in the name of Angela Constance on the modernisation of Scotland's career services be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is not agreed, therefore we move to a vote. Members should cast their votes now. The result of the vote on amendment number 5109.2 in the name of Neil Findlay is as follows. Yes 50, no 62, there were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed to. The next question is amendment number 5109.1 in the name of Liz Smith, which seeks to amend motion number 5109 in the name of Angela Constance on the modernisation of Scotland's career services be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is not agreed. We move to a vote. Members should cast their votes now. The result of the vote of amendment number 5109.1 in the name of Liz Smith is as follows. Yes 78, no 33, there were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed to. The next question. Agreed to. I'm sorry, I will read that again. The result of the vote on amendment number 5109.1 in the name of Liz Smith is as follows. Yes 78, no 33. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore agreed to. The next question is that motion number 5109 in the name of Angela Constance as amended on the modernisation of Scotland's career services be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is not agreed. We move to a vote. Members should cast their votes now. The result of the vote on motion number 5109 in the name of Angela Constance as amended is as follows. Yes, 76. No, 33. There were 2 abstentions. The motion is therefore agreed to. Before I close this session, could I just say a few words about John Park? As members know, John Park has tendered his resignation from the Parliament as a fellow Fifer and a member of Parliament representing Mid-Scotland and Fife. I will personally miss him from the Chamber, and I'll also miss him for the work that he's done on the Scottish Futures Forum. He's been a very fine parliamentarian, he's well liked across the Chamber, and he's had such a great deal of experience in the trade union movement and the campaigns for working people. He is, in my view, a great loss to Parliament, and I wish him well. I know that the Parliament will wish him well in whatever he does in the future. I now close it.